some increase in views and visits, likely due to media releases, social media posts, and possibly the local newspaper prints. For example, the little spike on the 27th would have been when the Nelson Star was released. While there are many assumptions we can make, it's clear that residents use various methods to access the platform. In another graph not shown here, we can see online that approximately 30% of visitors access the platform through social media, 14% through the city's website, and 40% arrive directly by just typing in "Let's Talk Nelson" into their web browser. The remaining visitors came from different search engines, etc. This year we had 447 views and 113 contributors. That represents roughly 0.9% of Nelson's residents. Comparing to last year's budget engagement, we had 547 views with 600 contributors. So unfortunately we missed
60.
60, sorry.
Yeah.
Did I say 600?
Yes.
Yeah, no, we weren't that yet. 60.
Amy, sorry, do you want me to interrupt you if there's questions, or do you want to just get to the end? Leslie, did you have something?
Sorry, can you just explain to me the difference between contributions and contributors?
Yep, so contributors are individual people that submitted something. Contributions, the way we are learning about Social Pinpoint because it's a new platform, so I set it up as there was a survey portion, and down below there was also additional feedback and comments. So those were two different contributions. So if the same visitor went and filled out the survey and filled out the additional comments, that would count as two contributions.
Okay.
So that's why I think we're seeing a lot more contributions than contributors.
Okay. So the 113 contributors is the 0.9%.
Correct. So comparing to last year's, we had 547 views and only 60 contributors. Unfortunately, we missed the window to have an insert in our water and sewer bill this year, so that may be one reason why we're slightly down in views. However, we've almost doubled the participation from last year, which is exciting. As we continue to use Let's Talk for all city engagements, I think we'll see a percentage of the population become accustomed to using kind of a single platform, which will be good. And as we review the results in the next few slabs, just to keep in mind that that does represent only the views of the residents that filled out the survey, not everyone, and depending on their comfort level of budget information. So jump right in. To create a safer neighborhood, we are increasing the budget for police to accommodate additional police officers and modernization of the 911 service, Next Generation 911. When asked about their support for police services, the survey resulted in an average of 6.19, leaning to more agree than disagree.
I just want to add, as you go through it, you'll see that this one was probably the most people that answered zeros and tens. There was a lot more you'll see kind of in the middle, but people had strong for or against opinions on this one, and we saw that in the comments as well, that there were some that really strongly in support of adding more police officers, and some that wanted us to perhaps look at alternative ways of dealing with situations that we're seeing. But yeah, just you'll see them as we go through. It's less this type of shape to it.
Chris and Amy, do we know how many people this represents?
I believe everyone answered this question. So
That's
it's like 113.
So that's, yeah,
13.
okay,
There was very few that were skipped.
okay.
Yeah.
So this is, we consider this a contributor? Or
Yeah.
whatever category that 113
Yeah,
was called.
yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
So like Chris mentioned, when we look at the fire protection, when we asked about their support for increasing funding for fire protection, survey respondents gave an average rating of 8.41, making it the most strongly agreed upon question. So we can see a majority of the people were well in favor. To allow additional access for our community members, the Nelson Public Library is proposing to add Sunday openings to their operations. When asked about their support for library services, the survey resulted in an average 6.31. To allow for greater enjoyment in our growing number of park spaces, we are increasing the budget for parks, the Parks Department, to support ongoing maintenance and allow for annual upgrades to our parks public washrooms. When asked about their support for increased funding for city parks, the survey respondents gave an average rating of 6.55, indicating a slight lean towards agreement.
This one I also found interesting, because when you get to the last slide and you look at what folks prioritize, parks is quite high, yet, you know, I don't know how you can kind of read into that. Maybe they like parks, but they don't necessarily need park washrooms. I don't know, but yeah, there's something there where they value parks, but not necessarily increasing funding for parks, I suppose.
Well, and psychologically, we respond to things differently if we're asked objectively, how do you feel about this thing? Versus how do you feel in comparison to other things? It's like a different.
Yeah.
You also grouped public safety and police together
True.
on that last slide.
Yep.
So you weren't able to
Yeah, that's one where
distinguish between the two.
in retrospect, looking at it thinking that might have been one to split up. Yeah.
When I look at this graph, I think there's a clear majority that are either neutral or
Mhm.
strongly in favor, right? There's very few people actually on the sort of the
Could you go
left
back?
side of that graph.
Could you go back just one really quickly? Whereas this is a little bit,
It's
or no,
library.
sorry, the one. Okay,
The police one,
yeah.
For this kind of graph, I like count the 7, 8, 9, 10 and then subtract to find out how many people would not be in favor of whatever the thing said.
Mm.
So 15, 30, 40,
Yeah.
you know, 55%, so 45% of respondents do not increase funding for police services.
What
Do
about
not
is
support
neutral?
rather.
Isn't 5 neutral?
Yeah, but if you're agreeing, if you're just trying to make a dichotomy in your head, that
Yeah.
like that's an easy way to just kind of like split it out. That's how I do a little split before I dig into it more deeply.
get your calculator out. I was just curious as to what we're talking about with the distribution here, let's say on the police one, but then you look down at the, I forget what you call this, the cloud, word cloud. Police is number one, right in the center, so I don't
Yeah.
understand.
That one,
They mention it,
yeah,
Yeah,
so they might be in favor or not in favor,
Right.
right? They just have police in the word.
Oh, so, okay, so
That's what a
police
word
is
cloud
a
does.
general, this, the
big
bubble,
topic.
what do you call this thing?
yeah, it's like a word
It's a
cloud.
word cloud.
cloud?
Yeah.
Word cloud,
yeah, it's
So-
just how many times it was mentioned, so you could be mentioning it in a positive or a negative
Yeah.
light, but it's just was the topic
Yeah.
of conversation.
Police got lots of discussion,
Okay, I understand.
either in favor or.
I thought it was,
against.
if it was large in the middle, it was like,
Hot topic.
yeah,
Yes,
okay,
yeah,
thank you.
Alright, moving on to transportation. To allow more people to move in and around our community, we are increasing funding for transportation. When asked about their support for increased funding, survey respondents gave an average neutral rating of 5.96.
Which I think we interpreted as it's just stuff we have to do and
Yeah.
I'm not super stoked about it or unstoked about it, it's just the basic work of the city.
When asked about their support for increased funding for city buildings and infrastructure, survey respondents gave an average rating of 6.33, indicating a slight lean towards agreement.
Although again, I see the majority of people on the right side of that graph.
Mm.
Not that many that are against that, right?
I would think they wanna see numbers and projects, right? To me, I see an
pretty
openness
high
to
level
consider in the middle there.
Lastly, in the survey, they were asked how clear and understandable they found the budget documents. The survey respondents gave an average rating of 7.17,
Well done.
Good work.
and I did not fill out this.
Chris and Amy, 6 times each.
So respondents were also asked to rank various city services in order of priority.
This is
Public
100.
safety emerged as top priority. Many responses followed closely by parks, infrastructure, and recreation.
And library is not here, which is interesting because it was in the other, like I don't see it there.
Is it included in recreation facilities?
It's a question.
Yeah, and police and fire services together is an interesting way of expressing that.
That's for next year.
Yeah,
Is
great.
this, sorry, is this like the number of people who voted for the top one was 6 people? Like what are
No, so what it does is it takes, so when everyone fills out their order, then it puts a formula on it to see, okay, this one was, and I think the numbers down at the bottom, they don't tie it, it's just so that you know a relative compared to the others.
Okay.
What's top of mind for people?
so how is this generated again? This was different from the other ones. Obviously the categories are different.
So
So you just
people
rank them?
Yeah.
You just drag and
Right.
drop.
So that, I guess that's my point. Psychologically, there's just a difference when you reference
Mhm.
things against each other. Activates a different part of the brain, I guess.
So lastly, touching on the word cloud, respondents had the opportunity to leave additional comments, feedbacks, or questions. So here is a summary of the most discussed topics. The biggest topic of conversation was policing, with both positive feedback on the current year increases and also suggestions for alternative options. With a total of 45 additional comments and feedback, we saw many comments generally in support for the Nelson Police Library, fire and wildfire protection. Many of the constructive criticism comments were given to look at alternative policing options and the general affordability of Nelson. So just from the finance department, we want to thank everyone who participated in the survey and provided feedback on the budget. We encourage residents to sign up for Let's Talk Nelson to stay informed about all upcoming community engagement opportunities throughout the rest of the year.
Streetlights, who knew?
I know.
I thought I just wanted to let you guys know that the Let's Talk Nelson setup, I went through it. It was great. It was so well set up. There was so many great places to get extra detail, to see the timeline. I've seen obviously those platforms around, but I just really want to commend you guys for filling it out so robustly.
And I think our new communications person brought this piece of software to us, and I think it's a great platform, so positive in terms of contribution of Donna and Denise, and
Yes.
obviously the content from our finance group.
Well, the Let's Talk page itself, Amy built that.
Oh,
Like, she
okay.
just taught herself how to do it.
It's very user friendly.
You say that, but I tried to do a couple things and crashed it, so.
Well, way to go.
Yeah.
Very user friendly if you're a good user.
I just didn't want to say
You're a
that part.
Knowledgeable user.
Winner error.
No, but it was really well laid out.
It is a really cool program,
Every opportunity you had to map a piece of data at the different breakouts. It's a great one-stop shop. So yeah, it's great.
So yeah, going forward, we spent quite a bit of time on that 4-page document, the quick facts piece. What was the number there? 25 or so people downloaded it, as opposed to the remainder of folks. Those other 540 views were just looking at the Let's Talk page that had similar information. It may be something in the future to just beef that up a bit more and not have the downloadable document, but just put more on that page. I think people can get more from that than having to go and download a PDF, so that might be the way to go.
Historically, I think you said it at the beginning, but where are we as far as public engagement with this process as in the past, perhaps? Was there, more or less, or how do you feel about it?
My time here, we've tried various routes. We've been in the Nelson Library, we've been in various locations, I think we're at the Hume sometimes, and very low turnout to those in-person public engagement processes. I think the biggest year when I was here was we doubled the seniors parking passes and from $15 to $30 or something, and we had the biggest turnout. So unless it's my experience, unless it's something a bit controversial, just have not had a lot of turnout at actually live events. You know, this seems to me a much more effective tool is to give people their own opportunity to engage on their own time versus us trying to get you to one location at one time. You know, I think Chris and Amy have talked about, you know, maybe doing more of this work at the front end. So as we go into budget, you get a sense of people's priorities and where they see how we're doing or not doing, or where they think we should be spending more funds or spending less funds, and you know, that could help shape sort of that early conversation.
So instead of preliminary draft budget, then public engagement, perhaps public engagement, then preliminary draft budget, then another
public,
round of
yeah,
public
yeah.
engagement.
Yeah, or you do something in the late summer, early
Yeah.
fall, just a bit of a check-in on the community and how are you feeling about things and what are some things you would like to see improved, or, you know, investing your funds in the future, and then that can sort of form the beginning of the budget conversation, as the city manager said, yeah.
My experience with, we've done these public surveys in the past, my experience is, depends what time of year you do them. You do them in the winter, then snow removal and all that is top of mind. You do it in the summer, we tend to hear things about parks and, you know, those things that are sort of in front of people at the time, so it's hard to get that full picture of the city because people just tend to, you know, what's in front of them, that seems to be more important. Like you know, if we have challenges in the downtown over the summer period, I bet you would see a high concern about public safety. You know, we did this at this time of year, things are settled down a fair amount on the streets, although it was definitely, you know, front and center for, you know, the summer, the encampment, all those things. I'm sure it's also, you know, still top of mind for a lot of people, but so my experience is, depending on the time of the year, then we'll, you know, if you did it in the spring, potholes would be front and center. Yes, do more paving of streets and all that sort of thing, right?
So I jotted down a few of the things that we have done. I think Amy mentioned them already, but you know, we had our public budget meetings. We did water and wastewater back in October. We did hydro after that, and then we had 4 meetings for the general budget in January and into February. We did this online feedback piece. Nelson Starr did an interview with me and getting some information from here that they put in their online edition as well as the print edition last Thursday. Donna, I know, was pushing this out on social media. She had that sign out front of City Hall that told people to participate. I did a budget presentation for the Chamber of Commerce a couple weeks back. So we've done quite a bit to try and get people out there to participate.
So that brings us to today, where we presented feedback. Later tonight, Chris will provide RFD for the financial plan updates and potentially the first 3 readings of that financial plan. And then later on, we'll do the adoption of the financial plan so that we can do the tax rate bylaw after that. Question?
Go ahead.
I forget, what's the percentage commercial residential?
About 75-25.
Which one is which?
The residential 75.
You might know this, and maybe you could tell me if this is true or not. Is it true that 60% of the tax rec in trail comes from tech? Did I read that somewhere? Did I make that up?
Don't have the exact percentages, but yeah.
I'm sure I read that.
Because it's higher, I don't know.
See,
That's what I
65, eh?
Yeah, it's, you know,
It's just so interesting.
Nelson is quite unique in not having industrial tied to our
Yeah,
community.
it's so interesting.
Like almost every
Yeah.
other community
As an industry.
across the province has
Selgar.
large industrial.
Castlegar is similar, having
Well, you have the
the
north,
residential smaller than.
right? You have that huge oil and gas tax base in the north. You have almost every community were very unique, and that was really the genesis of the boundary expansion and bringing the dams in. It was the only quasi-industrial that
Oh, really?
was in our region. Yeah, that's why the boundary expansion. It was to create somewhat of a industrial tax base.
I did not know that,
To bring what in, sorry?
The dams.
So interesting.
So I think that's, that's what makes this town, we're very reliant on small business, and so. And then we also have this incredible variety and cultivation of small business too, which is, I think, pretty magical in that sense of like, for a very small interior town. But a lot relies on that. But I think what's interesting too now, people working at home, is changing the face of Nelson too, right? Because you can have a lot of people making professional wages in their home.
That's a good point. They don't go to an office that's, a class 6 commercial building, they do it from home, right?
And that kind of jumps off my point the other week about like home-based businesses,
Yes.
is that similar. Remote workers is a little bit different than a home-based business, but it's like there's a lot of kind of city.
Yeah, people are engineers or they're a graphic designer, they're working out of their home, but they're making professional wages and that's supporting the town. It's a pretty unique place we live in.
And now with obviously remote work, you might be, that person might have been in Vancouver or somewhere else in the past, that they can now be in our community and that BC provincial government, I think policy, you can, most of their ministries, you can work anywhere in the province as long as there's a government office in your community or distance of your community, so.
Okay, is there any other comments or questions on this at all from anybody?
I guess what we want to hear from council, we have that tentative budget meeting set up for the Friday. And that was set up based on the feedback we got here. If there was anything that was pressing that council wanted to revisit, or does council feel based on the public feedback and the work we've done, that seems to be the right place. We can proceed with bringing forward that financial plan. We're hoping to get that passed in March still.
Yeah.
So we want, especially those capital projects and staffing decisions, et cetera, that are in this budget.
Yeah, I suppose that's the one challenging piece about as we stretch into 2025 is just giving staff managers that clarity of, yes, these projects we're good to go ahead on, these ones, what's in their work plan so that we're not pushing too far into, I know we have till May to 15th, but the earlier we can do that, then the earlier we can get moving on things. So.
Councillor Page.
Yeah, my only flag would be, as we had gone into COVID, in those years, we had squared away a few funds for the purposes of economic development planning, in case we needed to use it. And if we
And I think
could or would do that as a hedge, in case there's some need to
so on that.
organize the community.
Yeah, so I think on that one, I think we've taken funding from our reserve or surplus to, do that, so I don't think.
As long as we've got the flexibility.
Yeah, so you can do that by resolution and we would update the financial plan later. So I think, that money's, we don't have to, it doesn't impact taxation and so I think we have the flexibility to do that.
I think that's an important point, is that you set a financial plan, you use that to inform what your tax rate bylaw is going to be, but at any time you can amend that financial plan. So things will come up, you'll want to come up with a different plan. If you're talking about pulling something from reserves or surplus, you don't have the ability to tax for it anymore because you've already sent your tax notices out, but you can make those other, if you're talking about economic development and pulling from a reserve, that's always an option.
Councillor Wood.
Thank you. So did you need a vote on the tentative board budget meeting, or is it just a thumbs up, thumbs down, or?
Well, our next process is to bring the financial plan bylaw to council and
So we got the first 3 readings this evening. Assuming we do that, then we'll just pull it from the calendar for Friday.
Sounds good.
Councillor Payne.
Do we have an opportunity to see any of the comments? Are they available somewhere that we can look at?
Yeah, I guess we can share them, they're all over the map, there's some that are less appropriate than others, and there's some that are fine.
I just thought
and
it was
so,
interesting
yeah.
with the Fell Street to be
Yes.
able to read what people's
Yeah.
specific things were, because then it's an opportunity to understand, was it just something that they didn't understand?
Yeah.
Or was it something that they totally got and just really didn't like it?
Yeah.
And that to me is a different perspective.
Yeah.
But yeah, based on the fact that 1% of the population has contributed their feedback, I don't really see anything dramatic that people have spoken or not in this case, really.
So yeah, I did put this slide on here, it's kind of small, good thing I got it up on the screen too. But these are a lot of the things we talked about a month ago. You know, what are sort of these tariff implications, things that we can do. So there's sort of two buckets here, right? There's those things that we can do as a corporation internally to, you know, watch our own finances and budgets. And then there's also, you know, what are those types of things we can do in collaboration with the Chamber of Commerce, or, you know, to try and help stimulate things in the community here. On that second point, I know there's a meeting tomorrow with the Greater Nelson Economic Development,
GNED?
GNED, yes. So I'll be going to that as well, that Tom's invited me to go, and we'll just sort of, I know that's the top of the agendas, to kind of think about those kinds of things. I know the chamber already put in a request, I guess, to open up patios earlier. So things like that might be something to discuss. So that's sort of the second
Yeah,
bucket.
so we'll pull out our 25-point COVID
Yeah.
plan from back in 2019 or so.
You send it around?
Yeah, we can,
I have it.
you part it?
I already did send it around.
You already sent it around?
I can send it around.
You sent it around?
Never mind.
I would love to see it.
Yes, I'm sending it now.
Thank you.
Okay, so we'll, you know, because as Chris spoke to, there's both internal things that on our own operations, but there's also things that we can do within community, you know, in the that plan, for example, we, you know, waive patio fees back on that one. You know, in this plan, we'll look at, you know, trying to accommodate opening patios earlier. You know, we looked at a bunch of things that would support our local economy and our own community, and, you know, I think one of the big ones there was we really prioritized our spending on the biggest impact in our community. So, you know, if we're buying something, you know, like a truck, it doesn't have a big economic impact on our community. But the BC Transit exchange that's been developed is a local contractor, so they're employing local people, buying local supplies, etc. So we'll really look at, you know, to make sure we're spending, you know, prioritize that spending within our own community. And if we're gonna put off some spending because of the impacts of price escalation or tariffs, then those would be the ones that are something manufactured somewhere else, and there's very little economic impact locally.
Go ahead. Thank you. It seems like the challenge is going to be that people are going to be nervous because of all this turmoil, and so they're gonna be, I would imagine, people will probably be watching their budget line, and, you know. So I'm just thinking about the can you describe what you think, let's say, the effects on Canadians and effects on Americans from this, in your knowledge of tariffs? Is it everything becomes more expensive, or is it like product centered, or what do you think the impacts will be, like, on a kind of personal level, family level?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of it's unknown right now, and there's impacts, of course, of tariffs, and then there's impacts of reciprocal tariffs.
Yes.
And that has an effect as well, right, making things more expensive here. on one hand, it's, you know, our ability to export and do business with the states, and now things are also becoming more expensive to import. I know they're projecting probably a steady, you know, at every Bank of Canada meeting now, you know, quarter point reduction, so 1 percentage point reduction by the summer, by June, which is probably a little bit more aggressive than they had expected before, so we'll probably see interest rates come down faster to kind of counter potential you know, inflation or things of that nature, right? But you're right, I don't know what kind of impact that has on folks. Things get more expensive, but on the flip side, maybe that nervousness, people say, well, let's hold off on this project, or let's not do this, or let's not do the renovation on the kitchen, or that type of thing, just the messaging that's kind of coming out. So does that have an effect of actually slowing things down because people are kind of nervous to do things? So I think it's kind of a bit unknown.
It's definitely inflationary.
Yeah.
Right.
Absolutely inflationary, and, you know, will likely affect employment. So we might see higher unemployment rates both locally and in Canada in general, so I don't think any of it's good news.
So I tend to bring some of this discussion to tomorrow's meeting advisory for Ned. But, you know, I'm reminded of how we went into the last economic downturn, the anticipation of a slowdown. This has obviously got a different shape to it, but we saw a lot more local tourism in terms of people coming to Nelson because they were traveling regionally, and it made sense because we had a great summer to be here, and it was busy. And that's the kind of thing we want to capture. We want to capture a friendliness to our American neighbors who want to come and support. So that's messaging through Kootenay Lake Tourism to make sure we're getting out there that, you know, we want you to come. Our beef is not with Americans, it's with, you know, the guy at the top who's capricious. And I think there's an element there of how we do engagement with the community that was affected. Because we had Zoom calls with business owners, there was, you know, ground truthing that was going on, there was sharing of tactics and preparations and making things stronger. The difference now is we're not limited by in-person engagement, and I think there's a real opportunity to take things like we did with the Nest Lab in that first year of 2019 and follow models of talking about what the problems are, identifying groups that want to work on them, identifying commitments they want to go out into the community and do, and really activate and really take time to strengthen our own community through this group effort over 2025. So the tariffs might disappear. He might change his mind in a day or two, and he might change his mind back at the start of June or May or anywhere else. And so I think as much as we're activating people around what's happening there, let's make sure we're creating some facilitated space to be doing that. And we have models that we've used in the past. Might be too.
And it's very possible that this doesn't have any measurable impact on the economy. It could even be net positive. So let's
Make it net positive.
It could be.
Let's go with that.
And it's really interesting about the idea that we're trying to drop barriers between provinces so that there can be more flow across the country as a you know, as a whole.
Well, and I think people are familiar with the sort of the West has, you know, dropped, you know, there's no barriers across the West, Manitoba, Saskatchewan, Alberta, BC. And that's why we're in this, you know, those sort of trade agreements where we have to, projects over a certain value, we have to make those available across those provinces so that.
That's my first bullet point up there, yeah, that
Okay, yeah.
New West Partnership Trade Agreement there. So that's when we talk about, when we go out for public procurement, that $75,000 for goods or services or $200,000 for construction. That's the free trade agreement we have there, but underneath those levels, our purchasing policy already states that we can prioritize, you know, Kootenay businesses, for example. So we would look to continue to do that at below those dollar levels. And, you know, again, even above those thresholds, we're still talking about Western Canada here. So we're supporting, you know, our neighbors to the east. Maybe I'll just mention a couple of things that I have on here. I know we talked about vehicles, in just speaking with Jody and Suzanne, our purchasing manager, talking about, we only have a couple more that we needed to source for 2025, but looking at, for one vehicle, what we have available on lots as opposed to getting something built custom for us. And the second one, we actually were able to source potential used vehicle in Alberta that seems to meet all the requirements. It's got 45,000 kilometers on it. It's half the price of a new one. So we're gonna bring that in and just kind of take a look at it, test it out. But stuff like that, I think, is really good economical way of trying to deal with potential cost increases. We talked about our inventory is high, we just carry higher inventory post-COVID. So water and sewer pipe, we have enough for 2025. And we're looking at, in the next few weeks here, seeing if we can get a handle on getting some for 2026 as well, bringing that in. Hydro transformers is one that, there's a number of Canadian manufacturers, but it's almost like vehicles where, the components might cross the border several times by the time you put together a transformer. You buy the wire here, you assemble it here, it gets put into a transformer. It's hard to source each component from where it originates, but there's a Canadian manufacturer that we've used in the past, and so we'll kind of look at that. A lot of their components are from China, but those are options as well. So we're going to get that quote out this week as well by Friday, and it's not in that first round of tariffs, the first 30 billion that's out there, but I don't know what that next 125 looks like.
Just before we go to you, Jesse, just want to acknowledge that Mayor Morrison has actually joined us online.
Great.
So welcome to Mayor, and Mayor, if you have anything to add, please let us know. Just come off of mute if that's possible, and let us know if you have anything to say.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So I'm just, as you were speaking, I was just thinking about how, of course, across Canada, all the suppliers are gonna be doing exactly the same thing that we're all doing. So it's interesting to think about the financial sort of cross-Canada impact of Canadians turning towards other Canadians and other Canadian manufacturers. And I just wonder about the effects of that. It can make small businesses quite large quite quickly if people are like, sourcing, let's say, transformers and stuff from, a few Canadian companies.
Well, you make a good point that, you get the tariff impact, but it could have the same effect as we experienced after COVID, where there's this increase in demand where everybody's thinking, I got 21 days now before the next round of tariffs, I gotta source this and this and this, and now the supply chain becomes a factor, right? So.
And you might see an offset of, obviously American companies are buying Canadian product as well. So when our products become more expensive for them, they may be buying less from us, and so there'll be interesting social experiment here.
Yes. Councilor Page.
Yeah, just riffing off the comments earlier, like with the Northwest trade agreements, partnerships around procurement and the purchasing side of things being a good piece that we have. Something I heard, obviously I had the opportunity to talk to many people across the riding, and the theme that came up a few times was, especially in the post-secondary, the transferability of Red Seal programs, welding, practical nursing, pieces where you can't necessarily start something in Calgary, finish it at Selkirk, take it on to Victoria. There's still a lot of work there that needs focus on, and I'm just so cognizant of a heritage renewal proposal and Woodward's conversation about how the community colleges is the anchor that the other anchor that kind of feeds the community. So where we can get better clarity from Selkirk, and I know they're there, but where we can work together through a KPLG when we get to conference and get ready for UECM to get that focus on that interprovincial barrier so that those students have that mobility because there's obviously some friction points there, talking to some of the old leads, and I think that you're mostly familiar potentially, but
Yeah, and it's not just between provinces, it's within our own province. It's, you know, I don't know if that's a lobby area that council wants to get into is, and I'm sure Kate's well aware of this, that, you know, like, to me, if you take whatever, 100 biology and Selkirk College should count anywhere in our, at least our province. Yeah, but you have to do all that work on making sure they're comparable and stuff. To me, if you take whatever, 100 biology here and 200 biology and you take 300 in UBC, you know, that the proof is in the pudding. If you can't pass 300 in UBC, then, you know, Selkirk needs to do a better job of their biology here to make sure students are successful at those higher things that shouldn't be, you know, all these equivalencies and the whole bureaucracy of.
my understanding is it's coming down around more nursing and more trades. That's what I was hearing from people.
I think interprovincially for sure.
Yeah, interprovincially.
Mayor Morrison, do you have anything to add either on the public engagement process or on the tariff section just had?
I'm good, thank you. I'm sorry I'm late, so I don't want to jump in. That probably whatever I wanted to say has already been said by somebody around the table. So thank you.
And I would just add, you know, Chris Johnson and I were at the CAO forum in Victoria 2 weeks ago, I guess, and this definitely procurement and how we work together better as local governments in procurement. You know, I know buying groups such as Canoe are a really strong tool that we all have. It was developed in Alberta and it's across most provinces, all provinces in Canada except for Quebec for some reason. But it's a buying group. They go and source. You know, they go out with RFPs on various products that local governments purchase, and you know, they definitely are looking at, you know, what the impact of tariffs are and their sourcing around that. So that's a positive. You know, Richmond talked about some of the work they're doing there, so we've made some contact, and that group was committed to, you know, working together and really starting to share, you know, what each are doing in terms of a good procurement opportunities to, you know, work more collectively together to get the best pricing we can, and not all of us trying to figure out where we need to source a Canadian product. You know, that maybe we can do that collectively and share that information. So that was a big topic at that forum.
Okay, is there anything else from anybody?
Plant your gardens,
Yeah.
grow food. Join together with your neighbors and do it. Even more fun.
Do you think, I mean, it's very early, it's just begun, but do you think there's some value in maybe making a public statement to the town about this? Or do you feel like we're just gonna trudge along and do the best we can as it comes at us?
Well, I think part of, you know, when we, you know, I don't know if anybody opened the document, but
Yes.
you know, we were, as you recall, very public with this. This is our approach, so I think communications process is important for the city to show leadership and through economic development and others, and what we're trying to do to support our economy and in this, and how council's, you know, prioritizing spending in areas where we are gonna get the most local benefit, you know, how we're trying to manage costs, such as, you know, the example Chris gave around the hydro truck, et cetera. So yeah, I think a communication strategy is critical as part of this.
I have a question. Might be for GM. and you might know more, like how does this gonna affect the city, the streets and the paving and the asphalt and the concrete and those sorts of things? Is that all Canadian bits and pieces? Okay.
I think pretty well.
Yeah,
All the paving companies, oil's the big part of that, so.
Right.
And when oil prices do, it really affects paving.
yeah, and then, as far as the infrastructure in the ground, pipe, we've got all the pipe in the yard already, so. It depends like how protracted it gets, how long, for dealing with this for all 4 years of this term, it'll be perhaps a little bit different, but I think with the sort of heads up that was given, there's a lot of that pivoting, and another thing that we did here at the CAO conference was just this idea around, like pipe's a major thing, like these critical things for the cities, and the suppliers really did, step up and are looking for the options. So it's not just us looking for the options, it's people that would normally supply to us, because we didn't buy from the plant that made it down in Texas, right? We bought from somebody in country that bought from the plant down in Texas. So they're looking to source it from somewhere else to try and keep those costs down, so. Yeah.
Janice, you have something to say, Mayor Morrison?
Yeah, so anyways, thank you. So while we're having this discussion, as you all know, that I'm a member of that Board of Mayors Alliance, and late this afternoon I got a notice, and I just sort of think when I hear Councilor Woodward asking about should we be making a statement or what should we be doing, and then the CAO saying, well, we're doing what we always do in the best, and that yes, we'll communicate, is that in the craziness of all of this, I'm just going to read this paragraph that I got from the consultant that's working for BMA. As if it wasn't enough of a roller coaster, U.S. Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick has suggested that there may be a pathway towards tariff relief as early as tomorrow.
Wow.
So, you know what? I think, so in the craziness of time and everything else that's going on, I think it's important that we have these discussions, and that we continue to have these discussions, and we continue to think local and think Canadian, because this is going to be a roller coaster. The person went on to say that they don't hold out much hope, but this is consistent with rumors that they've heard from other sources in Washington, D.C. So I just thought I'd just toss that in there, because I do get twice a day now bulletin updates on activity in Washington via this group. But this is, I think it's a roller coaster, is putting it mildly. This is like the ultimate crazy roller coaster that you could ever ride. So anyhow, thanks.
Thanks, Mayor.
And I think, that just creates so much uncertainty for business that it's hard to do business in that environment. People are going to cut back on things when we create all this uncertainty. They have no idea what their costs are next week versus this week or 2 weeks from now. That is not how business likes to operate.
So, if that's a good spot to leave it. We can move on.
Good spot is
Uncertainty. Yes, total uncertainty. We can move on to the city manager's report.
Sure.
Thank you, Amy.
Thank you.
Thanks, Anne.
Yeah.
Thank you, Donna. Thank you, Chris.
Thank you.
As I mentioned, Chris Johnson and I were at the CAO Forum in Victoria. We took advantage to set up some meetings with ministry staff, and we had one meeting with a minister. The first meeting we were able to get was with the staff from Ministry of Transportation. We raised the transit, both inter-community and our own transit expansion desires. I think the message at that time was, until government drops this budget, which they did today, were unclear on what kind of funding would be available for either of those initiatives. They asked us what kind of ideas we had to support additional transit. We certainly shared that it was hard for smaller communities like us to add new routes at the level that we need to, based on the current funding model. I think they heard that. We floated an example of, maybe there's some funding, initial higher levels of funding to get some more routes established, and until the ridership builds, they seem to be open to a model like that you could take that money and move it around the province. Maybe you get 3 years funding to add more routes, and as they get established and you get the ridership up, and then you start to go back to the current funding model. So I think there might be some opportunity to float an idea like that to intercommunity. They mentioned the BC bus service that's in the north, and they're evaluating the effectiveness of that at this time. They certainly acknowledge that trying to get through between communities is something that's important to try to influence. So that's in process. They talked about on-demand and car share, and we raised, are there regulatory burdens that, for example, would affect car share to be almost a, do some sort of transit type on-demand work, and if, maybe this isn't a financial thing, this is maybe a regulatory thing that they need to look at to ease some of those rules to make those fleets more available. I think they mentioned school buses as well, as how could they make those available. So there's certainly a initiative there to look at how do we use these vehicles that are already in community and in different ways, as opposed to having to fund new capital for those. I think they also mentioned like some of the nursing homes have vehicles, how could those be deployed in your community? So I think there was definitely an appetite of looking at how do we deploy existing vehicles in our community. They did mention the cycling lanes. They intend to add on to the Orange Bridge. So I think there was certainly I think there was a recognition that the challenges in rural communities to expand these type of services, and an appetite to look at some innovative models. So I think there's an opening there. Chris, anything else that came up for you?
No, I'd maybe just highlight, they came with all the the 3 meetings that we had down at the legislature with staff or, elected officials. They really talked about the budget, the constraints there. So that was something that, government had made very clear to all employees and elected officials. Things are gonna be tough, as evidenced by the announcement today of, another deficit of $10.5 billion.
Yeah, so I think there is a hiring freeze within the provincial government.
I'm very excited to hear what you just reported, because the 3-year funding to add more routes, would Sunday operation in our area be an opening, would that be an opening for Sunday operation?
Yeah,
Is that anything that would be considered under that, from what you heard, under that sort of funding stream?
yeah, well, we didn't, we met with them before the budget was dropped, so they weren't able to speak about specific things, so with no insight from their staff, but I think that would be considered a new route, Sunday service.
And I would just note that, these meetings, and I've gone to, a few of them now when I've, been around, and it's, what I really heard from also the staff that we were meeting with is how much they appreciated having like face-to-face contact and discussions with us. So while, this sort of 3-year funding stream or whatever that looks like that was just an idea that kind of came up through conversations about making us whole as we look to expand routes, right? And how can we do that? And, it leaves this funding gap for us, so how can that be addressed? And so, one of the things that I think both CAO and I left all those meetings with was, well, that was really worth it. Even just for those conversations where you can be creative and chat with them, so, and you might see some of that come out, and to be frank, there's some highlights from the budget today, but after a meeting with PSSG that CAO will update us on, that there's stuff that looks very familiar to them, what we talked to them about a couple of weeks ago, so.
I just wanna make sure that in addition to expanding routes, the expanding service is also part of that as well, because I've heard that the route expansion that took place in January has been noted and appreciated by people, so that's great, but the Sunday service is still a big, it's a really big issue from an employment point of view and from a, sort of a social justice point of view. You can be stuck scale if you don't have access to Sunday service.
Yeah, and that might be where, we get more creative around, on demand, Sunday, Nelson had Sunday service back, can't remember how many years ago, and when they had a cutback on the funding for transit, that's when it was eliminated, but ridership was very low on Sundays, that's why it was eliminated at that time, and so maybe a different model for Sunday. Maybe you don't need the big transit bus running all day on a Sunday. You need maybe it is a van from the, from some other operator that doesn't run on Sundays or something. So I think, us being more creative around, how we expand service is something that they seem to be open to and encouraging. So.
Awesome, thanks.
So that was the first meeting we had, and as Chris mentioned, we also met with Public Safety and the Solicitor General, and they had someone from Corrections there. The top actually MLA Brittany Anderson joined us for this meeting. Reached out to her and so she made herself available to join us at that meeting. We raised the issue of repeat offenders and the need to expand that beyond violent offenders. That we were pretty shocked when we told them that we had certain individuals that had 500 interactions with police in a single year. That they also identified that they felt some of the incidents that we have probably could qualify as violent offenders, threatening staff in retail shops, etc. like that could potentially get those people on the violent offenders list. They mentioned that there's right now the current model, there's I think they said 25 spots in the Kootenays that they support. There's 0 in Nelson right now, and one of our neighboring communities has 8 people on that list. So that program, they're in the process of evaluating the results of that program. Preliminary results is it's been very positive and dealing with those folks, and it's a holistic approach. It's not just about putting people in jail. It's there's other supports that go with it, but there's dedicated prosecutors, there's dedicated probation officers. There's less tolerance in the courts for those folks. So the whole system is designed to to be more effective and more streamlined to address those repeat offenders, in this case violent. And as Chris mentioned in the budget today, they've announced an expansion into other offenses. If you have the list there, Chris.
Yep. Yeah, this is just a quick summary. I didn't have time to dig into it, but this is, you probably all got it from UBCM as well. Speaking of a new community safety and targeted enforcement program pilot. So this initiative will specifically target robbery, shoplifting, theft, mischief to property, and property-related offenses, providing police with enhanced tools, technology, and investigative resources to curb these crimes.
So what's not clear in that is, the justice system side of that is, if we have more resources and tools to, arrest these folks, they need to deal with them on the justice side of it to jail those that need to be and support those others that need a different type of intervention. So hopefully that comes hand in hand. Like I said, I think on the violent offenders, they feel that the current program is working pretty well. So I guess if they have a similar type of program on the property crime, et cetera, then maybe we'll see some success. Emily Anderson was very supportive of the need to address repeat offenders, and it's in every minister's mandate letter is public safety. So this government is definitely committed to addressing sort of the challenges that I think came out of particularly COVID and then decrim and those things that created that big public safety concerns in our streets. So I think that's good news. Again, at the CAO forum, I raised public safety and homelessness as a topic that us as local governments can unite behind and lobby for change, or at least understand what the challenges in each of our communities and what each of us are doing to try to do our best at helping manage those. So there was some really good discussion and a commitment by the folks at our managers association level to be sharing resources and strategies, et cetera. So that was a positive thing as well.
Question from Councillor.
No, I was just agreeing,
Councillor Woodward.
reading the BC budget at the same time.
And finally, we had a.
Oh, can I just ask a question?
Oh, sure.
So when you're talking about the subject matter, like I'm really thinking about this year's tax burden, and policing is a big part of that, and so these repeat offenders are actually like, there's a direct correlation between the repeat offenders and the tax burden and the stress levels on our police force. So was that recognized that like cities
We're
are
really-
bearing quite a large weight, and citizens are in turn bearing that weight through taxation?
Certainly we raise, the impact on our police force in, continually trying to address the same folks without any, recourse to that, and just, being a small police force with limited resources, that, it was unsustainable for us to, be in this model. So that certainly was communicated and recognized, and again, Emily Anderson, affirmed that, her similar experience and what she's hearing from, business community and others around public safety, and that this is a concern in our community and it needs to be addressed.
Thank you.
So when they announced there's $36 million for community safety things, is there, then we wait for the granting stream, and then we're like, we're gonna get ourselves some more CSOs and it's gonna be paid for by grant? Is that kind of like the process how that goes, or it's all just an announcement until something else?
At this point, it's an announcement, it's just dropped, so, the process, I think one of the things that we learned there too is that, these programs exist, and like many things is you have to be your own best advocate to get them, right? So, in understanding sort of, it was an aha moment a bit with realizing that actually these, what we were calling sort of repeat non-violent offenders, these people that are, having property crimes, and, that actually this was violent because they were threatening people, and it's like, oh geez, we should have been thinking that way earlier, and ensuring that we're looking at the options that are there through PSSG for this repeat violent offenders program. So I think it's again sort of just an aha moment for us to really advocate for us in that. So it's something where, we'll be chatting with the police chief tomorrow. We have a meeting, I sent him a note to say, yeah, we're keen to chat afterwards, see how we can advocate together on that. So as far as whether it'll be grant stream, maybe something like that will come out, but one thing that I'm certain that we'll be doing is advocating for
inclusion in those programs and saying, hey, what's happening, how's it going on? And this is another thing that, through these meetings that we had and, always at UBCM, what we discuss is, we're very open to being part of a pilot project for this with them, it offers, I think, a nice opportunity for a smaller, especially with a small police force to try some of this stuff in a rural community, so.
And the final meeting we had when we were down there was with Minister Green from Emergency Management and Community Readiness. She was new in that portfolio, I think a new minister or new elected official altogether. And certainly, what we raised there was, this burden of the current granting system where we have to, to fund our program, we have to apply for 10 different grants and administer 10 different grants, and there's the application, the reporting, et cetera. So she certainly heard us on that, and we proposed, I think, similar to what council's proposed for a number of years, is you need to, you're gonna give us the money anyway, so why not just give us an annual amount that's predictable, so and we you can identify where we can spend this money, and we will report out of how we're spending that money, but instead of being so specific to a certain stream and all that burden there. So again, MLA Anderson joined us for that and supported us on that same tack, that this would be much more effective, especially in a community such as ours that has a fairly robust and sophisticated plan. So we're in the execution side of this, the implementation side, and we've been very successful in getting a number of these grants. So they clearly recognize that we're doing good work and doing the right work. So so just reduce that burden. Like we really added one full-time person to to the emergency management program just to administer and apply for grants. That's the cost for us to access those grants. So again, I think she heard that we would rather have that person or that resource actually implementing things versus being the grant applicant and reporter on all these things. So yeah, I as Chris mentioned, the feedback we got was it was really important to hear directly from community, and they don't know what's happening in community unless we're there, sharing what the challenges and opportunities in our community. So I think for me, one of the aha moments is I think we need to take more time to actually go to Victoria and meet directly with ministers and ministry staff. And the UBCM is our speed dating opportunity, but really I think we got an hour with each of these meetings versus that.
Well, it explains why the other councils and staff from the Lower Mainland aren't at UBCM, right? I mean, Kelly Green was a councillor from Steveston, I think, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah, I met her, but that's interesting, because I
Yeah.
think the mayor of Victoria came in and made 1 5-minute comment on one of the, and then she was out, of course, right? So
Yeah, they have ongoing access to
ongoing contact,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, so I think, as I said, I think we need to sort of plan on, going to Victoria on a semi-annual basis to, bring these things forward. So the other one I'll mention that came out of our UBCM meetings last year, actually came out of us not getting a meeting with the ministry staff, was around the concerns around EV fires in underground parking, and so their staff did get back to us on that one. Chief Hebert did have a meeting with them and raised the concern around the impact on potential impact on buildings with fires at that temperature that those vehicles burn at. And appointed him on a committee that's looking at lithium batteries. They also put him in contact with the regulator at the Canadian level, and forget one other person to start this discussion. The chief mentioned that there was work done in the 2022 to update the fire regulations around electric vehicles being in underground storage. For whatever reason, that did not get implemented in the 2024 building code update, so we have no tools to actually enforce this at this time. So we're really on a voluntary basis. We are working with our developers to at least locate those in an area where we could pull those vehicles out of the underground parking in the event of a fire. So we don't want to see those chargers buried in the bowels of a underground parkade that we can't get access to. So.
Yeah, well, the regional district on a different side of the building code is interested in having conversations about the complexity and therefore how some of it could be simplified or create for affordability purposes. I believe the national code is cycling on a 5-year cycle on the 2020 and the 2025, and those pieces are being reincorporated provincially after the fact. So if anything was conceived of nationally, I don't think we'll see that go in until this upcoming year and its engagement in public hearing process. But we may want to see if we're going to have conversations about building code, if we can do those conversations somewhat together, kind of have a cohesive vision coming from this area about where it needs to be safer and secure, might already be happening, and just need to wait for public feedback, and where we can streamline it so it's a little easier to get things started.
Okay. Yeah, so anyway, that one we're still working on, and like we are, like I said, the only tool we have now is asking for voluntary compliance. Get what the term for the fire standards are, but the fire standards do require enhanced sprinkler systems. An example is the new long-term care facility. They did not, even though the fire regulation calls for enhanced sprinkling, it was not in the building code, so they did not do that in that building, and basically built it to the building code standard at the time and are not. We approached them, they're not interested in upgrading that to this higher standard, so which is unfortunate. So we will raise that locally, that that the building code needs to have these standards in there. So that was, anything else from the CAO form that you want to mention? So that was, it was really great to be in Victoria and take advantage of being there when we were down there.
Who won best CAO of the year?
With the tiara and the sash?
Continue.
As was mentioned earlier, there is an economic development meeting tomorrow. Tariffs and the impact is on that agenda. We are in the process of answering, I think, 74 information requests on our 2025 rate application for Nelson Hydro. The part of that is applying the decision of the general cost of capital, which updated what return we get on both our deemed debt and our deemed equity portion. It's frustrating that BCUC staff seem to be wanting to go back to earlier rate application and COSA decisions versus the current decision that was specifically addressed what the cost of capital was. So we're trying to stickle handle that. I've reviewed our responses and have said we need to be really firm on this, that, you know, it was, you know, those were set under the, you know, the panel made determinations on that. So there's, like, for example, the panel identified a deemed interest rate for our size utility, and, you know, the BCUC staff is saying, why are you using this deemed interest rate and not the rate that was in the last rate application? You go, well, because the panel just told us to use that, so it's very odd that they're doing this, you know. So anyway, that's in process. I think we have to file that by the end of next week.
They have a new chair though, don't they, this year?
No, I think the chair that was, I think he was appointed a couple years ago, 3 years ago maybe. So
Some changes on.
no, I think they renewed Descartes. I think he came and visited us, and Nelson, and
Yeah.
he certainly was frustrated with the amount of bureaucracy that they put Nelson Hydro through as a small utility, and treated us like we were Fortis or BC Hydro or someone, so.
So how are there's a sister application there too around municipal regulated utilities, and wasn't there a conversation there about releasing the regulatory burden?
Well, yeah, I don't think that process ended up going anywhere. That it was, that was really, so as a municipal utility, you don't fall under the
Yeah.
Utility Act, right? So that process was really who should be regulated and not regulated, because you have these public-private partnerships in some cases. So municipalities were saying they shouldn't be regulated, and the Utility Commission jumped in and regulated some of those. So that was a separate process. I think that seems to have stalled. But certainly the chair of BCUC identified that the regulatory burden on a small utility like us, and those regulatory costs are passed on to customers, right? They're, you know, those, it's not like that's a freebie. So it's, you know, the last, I think, was shared by Scott and his team, the last, you know, the regulatory process for our hydro bylaw was a very smooth and I think there was 2 IRs on it or something, whereas this one seems to be gone back to the old system, at least at the staff level. It's kind of frustrating. There's like SCADA, for example. Why did our cost increase from 35,000 to, you know, 53,000 or something? Like $18,000 on $9 million is, it's not worth asking a question on. So they seem to be back in the weeds on a bunch of these things. You know, bunch of questions on our vegetation management program, a bunch of questions on, you know, how we forecast power purchases, like, you know, all those things that we've answered application after application after application, and there's no change to it. So it's still a bit frustrating to see that they just, you know, wanna sort of over-regulate. But we'll see. This is obviously a significant application because of the GCOC decision. Once we get that in place, then it's pretty straightforward going forward. And the final thing that I'll report on is GIS. We're still working on the business plan for that. You know, what we're looking at is what can we do, you know, what's the services that we're getting at the RD with that same expenditure, what could we do in-house, and what level of expenditure, reasonable level of expenditure would we need to, you know, get to level of GIS that we need in our community, so we're looking at a workshop probably in May to provide additional information. And one thing we did is go back to all our departments and say, okay, well, how would you use this, and what's the efficiency that you would gain and service level gains that you would get. So that will be part of that workshop, is for you to hear from the departments of how they would use this tool. And I think Chris jumped on the city of Roslin's GIS today, and just that level of information that they have at their tip of their fingers when if we have a water main break, and you know exactly what that water main, what the valves were, all the things that relate to how we would manage an event like that. And obviously asset management is a huge thing. I think that was what you heard from Nelson Hydro when they started implementing GIS, so that they know every transformer in the system, every part of the system, and that they know that they have whatever 200 of these ones that where one has failed, and they go, okay, 200 of these, and here's where they are across the system. So that's some of the value and just the efficiency of staff time when they're this would be deployed in their vehicle, so when they're out on the street and we have a water main break or something, all that information's available. They don't have to try to find a CAD drawing or other things. So emergency management, again, big part of why a GIS system is available. And based on what the work we've done to date, it I think it's not a $2 million bill that you saw from a consultant. It's actually a fairly small additional investment to I think make some good progress.
So if I hear this correctly, what you're saying is that GIS will be used at different levels across the departments, and so the cost, we're looking for proper cost benefit. Like, so Public Works, for example, will be a very heavy user of GIS, but I don't know, human resources may not be.
Correct.
So you're trying to figure out where to put the focus on. It's not just a blanket, everyone gets GIS. That's not a good cost benefit, right?
No, it's everyone ultimately, like on the Roslyn situation, Chris jumped on their public page. So all that information that are around their utilities is actually available to the public. The public can see that we got 200 2 kilometers of water mains that are from 1930 and older. So they make that all available to the public as well as to the internal staff. So those are the levels that you decide what information is available to the public, what's available to the staff. But once you have that in those apps, then city councilor could go in there and see what the ages of our pipes are and sizes and all that sort of thing. So it's not really what data we want to have on GIS and what that level is at that department level. But as far as access, that can be at various different levels. And this is much more familiar with this as coming from Calgary, where they use this substantially. But you build these different apps that give different information. Roslyn has an app that identifies all their fruit trees in their community. So if people want to pick fruit, they all come up on their GIS, and you know where all the fruit trees are, as an example. So it can sort of be whatever whatever you need in your community to provide that information, both publicly and internally, right?
Thank you.
And a big part of it is asset management, right? We have spreadsheets of trying to identify, pipes and valves and all those sorts of things, and that's not a tool that is accessible to, to our people out on the street, etc. So Charlie Henderson shared actually a recent incident. He was, I think on the weekend, he was driving up to the ski hill and we had a water leak up at the skate park in Rosemont, and the person on staff couldn't find where you turn this valve off. So Charlie was just about to go at a cell phone range and said, call Paul to get that information. And by the time he got to the ski hill, he had to line up at the public phone there to check in to make sure that happened. So that's, if it was on GIS, they would know right away where that valve was, and they wouldn't be trying to go down and figure out, find a CAD drawing of where the valve is or whatever.
Thank you.
Yeah. So, just to let you know, we're really conscious of trying to manage this within existing budgets, and I think we're looking at I think we're really close to being able to bring back a business plan that shows that we can probably manage this within our current levels, and I think ultimately there will need to be some level of investment as we grow the system, but right now we've been pretty fortunate to get a number of grants. There's a dashboard that's been developed for our EOC that has all the information that we got grant funding, and then they already built that tool for us. So that's part of the strategy as well, is to use grant funding to to build and enhance the system. Thank you. So that's it for me.
Okay, great. Thank you. So we've sort of run out of time for council reports. How many council reports
I wanna
was
hear
there?
from him, cause I got some questions.
It's,
I do, but
can we pick it up afterwards?
Yeah, like we can, was there, Leslie, you had something, so that'll be first thing after the recess. Sounds good.
so you'll go, the general manager will go first thing after the recess,
I
or?
can provide an operational update and then we can jump into the council reports.
Sounds good.
Okay.
Okay, so that being said, 6 o'clock, I have a motion to recess. Council Woodward and a second, Councilor Payne. Thank you. Great, thank you. So welcome everybody to council, March 4th. And the first thing on the schedule will be a small update from the GM.
Thank you, through the chair. So just to provide a bit of an update, as we ran out of time for the dinner break there. First thing I'll start off with is there was a question during the last meeting about the changes in the renovations or the repairs, being done to the Civic Theater and how much that would reduce GHG emissions. So we have our in-house energy specialist did some modeling and figured that the changes that are happening through this repair will reduce emissions by about 33%. So it's actually, quite a good win in the end when he pivoted from this larger project that was gonna have, significant reductions to, oh my goodness, we need to repair the roof structure of the building so that people can actually go in there, to being able to find all of these opportunities through that work to make these efficient upgrades and keep within the budget. So good win there, thought I'd follow up. A couple things operationally around town to keep everybody in the loop on. As many of you will have seen, BC Transit has started their work on the transit exchange on the 300 block of Victoria. So that will be ongoing till about end of June they're shooting for, so early July. So it's a fairly lengthy project where they will be putting in those bus bays to move the BC Transit transit stop there, the transit exchange. When that work is done, or through that work, and when it's done, towards the end of it, we'll be doing the work to remove the existing transit exchange and then making some adjustments to the traffic patterns there to increase parking up Ward Street there now, because we'll have that extra space without the buses parking on Ward and Baker coming on the downhill side.
And Chris, is the final design, is that publicly available? Is it
I believe
posted
it's
on
on, I'd have to check our website, but I know that we're putting stuff out on our website currently, so it'll be out there shortly if it isn't already. Another piece of work that started up, so again, pretty dry winter. We've jumped back into Kootenai Street, so you will have seen the city crews that have mobilized on the downhill side of Baker on Kootenai, right by Relish, the old co-op location going down there. So with that, we are understanding that there's the implications of the work happening there around the corner, also the implications of the work happening there to that patio of Relish and Vienna Cafe and also the Indian restaurant. I'm gapping on its name.
Tandoori Grill.
Tandoori Grill, okay. Anyway, so one of the things we're doing is kind of unique for us, first time, is we're double shifting. So work will be happening there from 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. Obviously being cognizant about noise on the far ends, but taking the winter shift that we already had crews on where we have a lot of coverage for plowing purposes and applying that now to our construction crews. So really trying to get work hammered out of the way and get out of there in weeks instead of months type thing. So it'll be an interesting model for us to try out, see if we can use that. Obviously, council's aware that we have a fairly significant infrastructure deficit. We have big plans, whether it be the refurb of Baker Street and replacing the pipes in there, or a lot of the work that goes on. So figuring out these new methodologies to do work in a shorter amount of time is going to benefit us all throughout. So pretty exciting there. An update on patios. Every time of the year this year, the business community gets really interested in patios. So just to provide council with an update, and this is something that we passed on year after year to the chamber and to the businesses through the chamber, is May 1st is the date that we shoot for patio openings. We always try to get it done earlier, but we commit to May 1st. Sorry. To dial in the mayor again. Anyway, so we are right up here. Or no, sorry. There you go. Sorry, it's a new system. We're just making sure that we got it all figured out. So yeah, with the patios, we commit to opening by May 1st. We shoot for earlier. There's a whole bunch of stuff that has to happen before we can open them. So just so council knows, that's absolutely on our radar, and our field crews are working hard to get those open as soon as possible.
Thank you. So obviously that has implications around the gravel on the roads. So does that mean earlier gravel removal?
Yeah, we've already started. Yeah, we started last week. So we still anticipate there's still some snow in the forecast.
For sure.
So we might end up putting some down, but there's a whole bunch of stuff that sort of complicates it, right? So we kind of have to clean above Baker Street before we can clean Baker, because if we get any rain, then Baker just fills back up. So with the big water main break that we had just above Baker there a few weeks ago now, I mean, there's a lot of material in some areas. So we've already started that process. If we get more snow, yes, we'll be laying down more sand, but it's easier, quicker to clean up. So just really trying to expedite the whole process and make hay while the sun shines. Weather's pretty good for it right now.
Thank you.
And then finally, just in general, overall, the downtown, as I mentioned, is starting to get that downtown detail works happening. You'll have noticed a bunch of work happening on the dog walk to clean that area up. The quick summary of that is, little to no maintenance has been done on that area since it was actually built. So what the crews are going through, cleaning up, nicking out a lot of those little saplings that have sprouted up to make it quite a dense forest in there, try and make it a little bit more healthy. Try and return a lot of that shoreline to more usable, safer use, removing some of the larger tripping hazards, some of the challenges there, some of the erosion, dealing with that. So you'll see a lot of work happening, or a lot of work has already happened down there. People often, when they see the work, get worried about it, and then green up happens in June, and everybody says, wow, that looks wonderful. So anticipate that'll be the case again here, but just wanted to give you a heads up on that. And then finally, snow's mostly out of the forecast for us, but just to make you all aware that we are still ready should we get another snowfall. We still expect another couple of little dumps here and there, but hopefully nothing major, and we'll be on to spring.
That's okay.
I haven't seen the latest reports of where we are at the snowpack, but I know we don't have an abundance of water, and it seems to be melting in a weird way. I don't know where we are with Freshette, whether it's come gone and who knows where, but my question is really around just following up on the flow-through coolers. Is there any action that's been taken there? Because that would be something that if we don't have to go through another summer with those things in full use, or at least not paying for what they're using, would be great.
Yeah, so there is a process being built out currently on that. But that will include a time to allow for these companies to work their way out of flow-through coolers. So, yeah, they're currently not allowed in new builds. There's the old existing ones, as those, once we get this work done that we're currently doing, we'll be able to communicate to those businesses that they have X amount of time, and that's something the council will see likely before it goes up.
Yeah, and I think one option we should look at is what do we charge for that water use, knowing that they're high water uses and
Sort of to motivate them to make the change sooner rather than later.
Yeah.
Because it has been a significant amount of time that we've been talking
Yeah.
about this, so it's not like they can be unaware of the
Yeah.
situation.
And in terms of snowpack, the meeting with the fire chief today, we're about 82% of normal. So, yes, we've had some warm weather, but we've, recently, we've
There
had
was some precipitation.
we've had cold overnight, so I think it is maintaining this snowpack up there, so we're ways away from, full freshet
Okay.
at this stage. But the creeks are starting to run, for sure.
They're starting to run.
Could we
Hear, we can't hear,
Oh, really?
yeah, we can't hear people when their backs are sideways or back.
It should be fully there, but we'll,
How about
It's
now?
not working.
Not working.
You're talking.
Nothing.
Check,
Yeah, we can hear him. Or we heard the,
Can you hear us now?
How about now?
we can hear you.
how
So,
about now?
Everybody else.
Does that work?
so we have a new system in here. Does that sound? Can you hear us?
We can hear you, you're facing us.
So there's, notice we don't have the mics anymore. So we have a new kind of gathering
Yeah, is
system.
The speakers on the back, not you,
I can hear them now.
Yeah.
They're on now.
Is it a bit
So that
better?
works?
I could hear your voice, cause
Can
you
you
were
hear me
facing this
now?
way, I couldn't hear your voice or the lady there.
I think that there's a dial for the speakers back here.
Okay. Some new tech.
In the meantime, we could maybe just speak louder.
Sure.
I could do that, thank you.
Did you have a supplemental thing there?
I do have one other question, but it's for the GM.
But it's for the
so-
GM, so.
Test, check.
I wait until he comes back.
Test, check.
You can't hear us?
Yeah.
So the
You have
speakers
to
aren't,
use your loud. We'll try and figure it out here, but
the speakers, well, you could hear them echo there.
Would you like to move a little bit closer as well?
Yeah, it would help if you moved closer. Okay.
Yeah, if we talk louder and you move closer, then we'll kind of like hit it from both ends. Thanks.
Okay, so I'm asking a question to the general manager, but I will direct this way. I'm just interested in the planned implementation of the improvements to the Hendrick Street right-of-way, park, whatever you would like to call it. I know there's been some discussion around that. We were really quick to get in there and clean it up. When are we gonna get back in there and make it beautiful?
yeah, so we have plans to sort of make a temporary area through there. We have significant waterworks that we have to do down that right of way. So I believe we're replacing either a storm main or sanitary main down there. So it'll all get dug up, so anything that we're gonna do is gonna be temporary in terms of putting in just some beds. So that'll be happening this spring when we get on that major push. Again, right now, we are focusing on the downtown core to get it open for patio season. So that'll be the main push, and then we'll move on to projects like that.
That's okay.
Thanks so much. Any news on the Ladybird getting back into its beautiful box?
Yeah, we continue to work with the design consultants and on ensuring that the Ladybird building or the structure is performing as per their design. So they are continuing to work diligently on that, keeping us very much in the loop and understanding how to get there. We hope that it will be in as soon as possible, but we want to make sure that the building that they designed is performing as per their designs prior to installing that.
Thanks.
So for those that just came in after the break, may have noticed that I'm not the mayor, and the mayor is joining us online tonight. Mayor Morrison, do you have any questions for the GM or anything to add?
No, I think I'm good for now. I think I thank them for their updates. Thanks.
Councillor Tate?
Thanks. I know we've kind of mentioned this at this table, but I just wanted to bring it up again because I know there's some complexity in moving projects forward like this with regards to the Hendricks right-of-way, since it was not a park but might soon become a park, maybe in the next fiscal after the waterworks are done. Just curiosity about reaching out to community groups that might be interested in participating in the parkification.
Yep, absolutely, and we heard that from a number of groups that were interested in making it, whether it be a community garden or, you know, some form like that. So we have communicated with those that have been in touch that we will be doing those major works in there that will require, you know, excavation throughout. So it's still a couple of years off. We have to look at how successful we are with our capital works program this year to see exactly where that lands.
And it is interesting that, you know, some of those houses above Heritage Lane, that they front onto Hendrick Street. So there's, you know, so it is a street in
Yeah.
some cases, so we have to be cognizant of, you know, not cutting people's access off to their houses. You know, obviously the lower part isn't that case, but the, you know, the next block up to Victoria is actually houses actually front right onto Hendrick Street. So not sure the history of that, but that's the case.
Councillor Page?
Go back here for my report.
Maybe I just wanna add one other thing I forgot to add is just, you know, we have formed a committee around the housing projects that have recently been approved, the supportive housing projects, and in particular the temporary housing at North Shore Inn and the shelter, and really working closely with the operators, police, bylaw, et cetera, just to, you know, our goal is to make sure those are as successful as possible and reducing, you know, the impact of people that aren't housed on our streets. So that is a strong work we're doing with those nonprofits and our staff and others. So just to you know, let you know that those are ongoing, and you know, I think we're having really good discussions, including, you know, what's the future of the North Shore Inn when it gets renovated and the other units are removed. You know, certainly the one thing we heard from the nonprofits was that, you know, there's a need for folks that, you know, come from the environment where people are still using to an environment where it's a dry site, and maybe that's a good fit for the North Shore Inn when it comes online. That the 45 Government Road will be more open to those that are still struggling with addictions, and once they, you know, hopefully go through detox and rehabilitation, that there's a site for them to come to that they're not, you know, having to, you know, kind of navigate that open drug use in the place they live. So I think we've had some really good discussions around that, and you know, just what's the holistic housing approach to this. So you know, street outreach is, you know, also working really strongly with us around how do we best manage, you know, the disruption on the streets. You know, we talked about, you know, for example, shopping carts that, you know, we're not, you know, if there's shopping carts that are left unattended for a period of time, and we will remove those. We're not, you know, people going around with 3 or 4 shopping carts. No, that's not okay either. So we're really working to manage the, you know, the disruption on the street and support people getting into housing and the care that they need.
Councillor Lachtenberg, did you have a question?
Yeah, so this is about the Ladybird, coming back to that. The Ladybird's where right now? Where is it stored?
Super secret.
The super secret spot?
Just kidding.
It's in storage? It seems to me, I've raised this before, but this is a perfect opportunity to reconsider, like it's a reset where we could look at what should go into that box. It's not the Ladybird's home, it could be, but it could be
the
other
grant-
homes as
The
well.
grant received was specifically for the Ladybird.
Sure, but I've asked this before, we can do whatever we want with it, it's ours. We can put, it's part of the Nelson Museum, and if the Nelson Museum decides that there's a better, or we decide that there's a better exhibit that represents the values of the lake, especially at a time when we're trying to encourage a more sustainable and reconciliation's important. I think there's definitely a better tenant for that building.
I'm okay with it, but I think we're at the stage where we're dealing with building performance, because whatever we
Yeah.
have in terms of building performance will dictate what opportunities exist going forward.
For sure,
Like it's-
but before we put the Ladybird back into the glass box,
Noted.
let's consider what else would be a better fit for that. And particularly I'm thinking of the canoe, Sinike's canoe would be, I teased the idea and they were really, really interested, and I think that's more representative of what should be there. So just wanna keep
So do you want us to reach out to the museum, because like I said,
Yeah.
they did get a grant to preserve the Ladybird.
Yeah, I'm sure, I've even, teased that around, and I think that the museum would be open to that conversation for sure.
Yeah, well, like I said, all I know is they specifically got a grant to preserve the Ladybird, and they have flexibility and other things that
Yeah.
they would know that.
Yeah, cool, thanks.
Okay, is there any other questions for the GM or city manager? Is there anybody that has a council report that they'd like to give? Councillor Payne and Councillor Page. Councillor Payne, would you like to go first?
I will. It has been a busy week around our little mountain town. I just want to acknowledge a few events that I was able to attend, and one was the Chamber held their monthly business after business at the new headquarters in town for Spearhead. They had a little presentation, and I learned more about that incredible business that is housed here in the Kootenays and world renown, now managed by the second generation. Really exciting. I sort of knew where they were out on the North Shore there, but if you haven't delved into that, wow, how incredibly fortunate we are. I did a decolonization workshop at the Nelson Public Library, and one of 3 that I believe they're doing, and I'm just really grateful to the library for leading on some of that work within the city. I think it's really important, and their board as well as their staff are just 120% committed to bringing that into all aspects of the library. Coldest night of the year. I volunteered. Councillor Woodward volunteered. I'm not sure if anyone else walked. We were pretty busy at the registration desk. And congratulations to all the walkers and all the volunteers, because Nelson Cares did meet their $100,000 goal. So very generous. Keep that Ward Street Place going, which is not run by grants or different levels of government. BC Heritage Week ended with a boom as Greg Nestoroff presented the lost buildings of Nelson to a, I would say, sellout crowd, but you didn't have to pay to get into the library on Sunday afternoon. I can't remember what date that was. It was last Sunday afternoon. 104 people packed into the gallery. The age range was diverse. I was standing beside a man who must have been in his 80s. His son brought him, and every time a picture came up on the screen, he started to tell his son his little story about that building that no longer exists in our town. So it was really exciting, and we're so fortunate to have Greg as our local historian, and I wish he had recorded that session and hope he will do something similar again. Just incredibly valuable, and I learned a lot. I wanted to mention just two other events quickly, and one was the Chamber of Commerce in their, I can't remember, Grace, she's their environmental consultant, but she's bringing a bunch of seminars together, and one of the things she's focusing on, which was, I think, absolutely fabulous, again, Councillor Woodward and Mayor Morrison were at this webinar where she's working together and bringing all of the restaurants and food producers to collaborate around collecting their organics, which is a huge part of our waste stream that's not dealt with by the city. They really want to do the right thing, all of these businesses, but it's really challenging to do it as a single business. So this collaboration with the other businesses and the RDCK to give them a better deal and some grants and incentives to do that will really move us closer to achieving our Nelson Next objectives. So kudos to the Chamber for making that happen, and Grace. The last thing I'm going to mention was last Saturday, fun event down at Lakeside Park at 1 o'clock. Many of our let's just say the police department, the fire department, the search and rescue, and I'm sure there were some others, for the Special Olympics and with some Special Olympians, went into the lake, fully uniformed. It was a beautiful sunny day, but I've seen the polar bears swim on New Year's Day, but it was a different experience to see all of these individuals head into the lake and had to go head under to make it count in their uniforms, so you could identify who they were. Our own GM of Nelson Hydro was there in his role as a search and rescue volunteer. So good luck to the Special Olympics. You can still donate to that cause if you'd like to. Just go online and that will get the event off to a great experience. So yeah, busy week, so much happening, and we all know that this couldn't really happen without the incredible businesses and the wonderful volunteers that are always so generous, either with their funding or with their time, both of which are extremely valuable. So thank you, thank you, thank you. And just going to mention one of my favorite events, which is Earth Hour, coming up on the 22nd of March between 8:30 and 9:30. You can turn off all your lights, candlelit dinner, play games, and Nelson could go dimmer, darker, whatever.
Turn the lights down.
Turn the lights down. This could be a lot of fun. I gotta tell you that in the early years, I think Earth Hour has been going for nearly 20 years now. It still happens all over the world where they turn off the Eiffel Tower, the Golden Gate Bridge, the Sydney Opera House. You can see a video of this. Nelson used to be one of the top 5 communities in British Columbia for electricity savings during that hour. Can we do it again? Only you know. So
Well, we
that's it.
switched to LEDs, so we don't have the same savings anymore.
We can switch to Gen 1 and Gen 2 only.
But if you turn them off, you're still turning them off. Don't do your wash, Saturday night between 8:30 and 9:30. Could be fun. That's it.
Thank you, Councillor Payne. Does anybody have any questions or comments for Councillor Payne?
Okay, I just wanted to, since we last met, some of the stuff we've had conversations about, so at our level, we've had our public engagement meeting down at the Prestige last Tuesday, and we're landing at a 9.4% absolute property tax, with net change of new properties and the RDCK side of it, so 9.4. Big cost drivers within that are a 12% increase to recreation, which is mostly preparing for capital and ice plant replacements. Interestingly enough, that brings us essentially to where taxation was at recreation in 2014. So effectively, over time, we've kept it pretty tight.
I think to be fair, the debt service was significantly higher in 2014.
Yeah, well, debt servicing is also driving it as interest rates have been increasing. Joint resource recovery, we're seeing a 10% budget increase. That is expected to drop off in 2026, 2027 as we wrap up paying for capital expenditures on the organic side. But we also have in 2024 had a systems efficiency study. It's led to closure of some of the satellite locations based on volume and traffic and frequency and proximity to core depots. And there's some additional works being done going into 2025, 2026 that should see additional savings. But for this year, we're seeing 10%, but it is an area of focus for sure. I attended with Councillor Payne and the mayor, the N2 neighborhood network public engagement. Police chief and was represented there, the police force was represented there well. Spoke to the challenges around the questions from the community on how we're addressing public safety in the community. Heard a clear message of the importance of getting housing first for much of the population. That was well given by Chief Donovan. And then also the difficulties in how we're having just in Nelson but across Canada. That was a very clear message from our officers too. But that we're focused, and there was a message there for that group to continue to advocate provincially and locally for changes around repeat offenders and property crime. We've heard some of those conversations earlier in the reports, so all good stuff. And then the childcare and community stakeholders group that's following the Stepping Stones project out of the EBCM is still meeting, getting ready to present to regional directors in terms of what local government can be doing and how to bring stakeholders together for the development of new spaces, removing barriers and identifying challenges for new spaces, and early educators and the career path that goes along with that to deal with some of the wait lists. So that, I still consider that early days for that group. They're finding their voice and their paths right now. But they're meeting, and that was some of the stuff I was doing since the last time we met.
Thank you, Councillor Page. Is there any other council reports? Okay, moving on to requests and delegations, and correct me if I'm wrong, but there doesn't seem to be any. Alright, and then moving on to bylaws. And sorry?
Not at this meeting.
I'm sorry, yes, of course.
First on the list would be the fees and charges amendment bylaw number 3636 2025, which has to do with the youth center, and I can just a summary, give people an idea of what it is. So the Nelson and District Youth Center offers a safe, inclusive, and engaging environment where youth can develop essential life skills, build social connections, and participate in both recreational and educational activities. While NDYC is committed to maintaining affordability for all community members, staff find it necessary to implement an increase to fees. Council is now being asked to pass 3 readings of fees and charges amendment youth center bylaw number 3636 2025.
I'll move to get it on the floor.
Councillor Woodward and then Councillor Lockenberg.
I'll just read it. That the Corporation of the City of Nelson's fees and charges amendment bylaw number 3636 2025 be read for our first time and second time by title only.
Is that just a vote then?
Yep.
Ask for any questions.
Is there any questions or comments?
Are we allowed to ask staff questions if they're present and we have a question?
Yeah, I think Terry's here, right?
Yeah.
That's why she's here, in
Yeah.
case you have any questions, yeah. she
Or
can
did
come
you
up.
have anything that you wanted to share with us or fill in some gaps at all?
In my opinion, it's pretty straightforward, but I'm here to answer questions.
I have a question for Terry. Thanks. Hi, thanks for joining us. Thanks for having me. Through the chair, I only skimmed this one, sorry. But I understand that it is the case that you don't actually turn anybody away at the door. Is that true? Do I understand that correctly?
It's true.
Okay, so what I like about the fee increases is that the people who can pay continue to pay, and that help offsets those who can't pay and still use the facility. So, great, thank you.
Any other questions at all? Okay, so does it just go to a vote then? Okay. So, all those in favor? Okay, it passes unanimously.
I'll move number 2.
Number 2, and the second, Councillor Lochtenberg.
The Corporation of the City of Nelson and Fees and Charges Amendment Bylaw number 3636 2025 be read a third time by title only.
A second. Oh, did you second?
Councillor Lochtenberg seconded.
Okay,
I have a quick question.
yes, Councillor Day.
I'm not sure if you're coming back throughout the year to give another update. I know you came pre-budget, but I have an interest in knowing like what kind of, I think you have a kitchen going on, but maybe through the year we could get an update on that and any other capital ideas that you have going on.
I would love to come back and give updates in timely manners. There's a lot of magical things happening at the youth center that are celebratory for the city.
Councillor Payne.
I don't know how relevant this is, but I'm just gonna mention it, that the schoolhouse after-school care is $7 a day.
Isn't it?
Yeah, and I don't know why it's not listed as being on the full day camps as well. But
I think because it's not true comparable in that they do have some subsidies available with funding because.
they do, because they're a $10 day,
Yes.
$10 day, so
Yes,
that's
so it's not a true comparable.
Okay. So then it probably wouldn't count in the after-school care section of it. Okay. That's what I was just trying to understand, why it was in one place and why it wasn't in the other.
Sorry.
No worries. Thank you.
Is there any other comments or concerns? Okay, hearing none, can we have a vote, all those in favor? Sorry, Councillor Payne, was that a yes or a no?
That's a fine.
Neither?
Don't need to be noted.
Thanks.
Thank you, Terry.
Enjoy your evening.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Take care.
Alright, and moving on. We have the official community plan amendments, Fell Street, bylaw number 3632, 2025. Just read this one as well. On behalf of Share Housing Initiative Society, Makala Development Services has submitted a development application for 1306 and 1308 Fell Street, which includes an amendment to the official community plan, OCP, and zoning bylaw number 3199, 2018. Council is requested to pass first and second reading of the official community plan amendment bylaw number 3632, 2025, and the zoning amendment bylaw number 3633, 2025, and to direct staff to schedule a public hearing. And to speak to this, I have these lovely people from plans.
Ken and Natalie.
And yeah,
Andrew Johnson,
is there, do I need to have, is there a motion or anything first, or we just go into the discussion? Okay, great. Please proceed.
And what is this? I don't think this is the right
No.
Tariffs
from, we talked about this earlier.
There it is.
Sorry, it was up. I was like.
So you're gonna talk about tariff implications?
I mean, I can read the slide.
Thank you. So through the chair to council, we're here tonight to discuss a development application that Development Services has received for 1306 and 1308 Bell Street. So in this presentation, I'm going to provide a brief overview of the application, including various different components, and a quick summary of the analysis, including feedback that we've received from the Greater Nelson Economic Development Partnership. A little bit about the endowment lands covenant that's registered to the subject properties. A review of the official community plan, the zoning bylaw, housing needs assessment, and an overview of public engagement and some other considerations, as well as a summary of referral comments that we received from City of Nelson departments and external agencies. And then I'll end with the recommendation. So the purpose of this application is to facilitate a 48-unit multi-unit residential building at 1306 and 1308 Fell. And there's 3 components to it. As the chair had mentioned, we have the official community plan amendment to change the land use designation from institutional to multi-unit residential. Zoning bylaw amendment to rezone the properties from I1 institutional to R4 high-density residential. And then should council approve final reading of those 2 bylaws, council would then be requested to consider the variance, which it looks at varying 3 sections of the R4 zoning. So the exterior side lot setback, front yard setback, as well as varying the maximum height. So I'm sure we're all familiar, maybe perhaps for those who haven't been up to East Fairview in a while. This map shows the location of the subject properties. So at the northwest corner of Fell Street and 11th Street, you have Selkirk College to the south across Fell Street, Health Campus to the east across 11th Street, and then just up 11th Street you have the Mountain Lake Seniors Complex. As well, there's 2 BC Transit bus stops within half a block of the property. And again, if you haven't been up there recently, here's some pictures just to show the property. So you have on the left an image showing the property from the Fell Street and 11th Street intersection, as well as a more recent photo from December of 2023 showing the property from Fell Street. So to get into a little bit more detail around the actual building itself, again, as I had mentioned, 48 units with a 5-story design, designed to resemble stacked townhouses. There's also a terraced design where the building is closest to the street at the intersection of Fell Street and 11th, and then is terraced back to meet the setbacks of the neighboring buildings to reduce the overall bulk of the building. As well, there's both underground and surface parking with access from 11th Street. Overall, there's 38 vehicle parking stalls, 2 stalls for persons with disabilities. All the stalls are also EV ready, so there's the ability to add EV chargers in the future if need be. At building construction, there would be 2 EV chargers installed, as well as 2 stalls for car share. As well, to address the sort of deficit in parking stalls, the applicant has agreed to volunteer $3,000 per stall that they haven't or they won't be constructing in alignment with the regulations that are in the zoning bylaw. As to bicycle stalls, there's overall 72 bicycle stalls, 48 long-term or indoor stalls, and 24 short-term or outdoor parking stalls for bikes. So getting into the summary of the analysis, this project, along with the project on Front Street, sort of originated with the Greater Nelson Economic Development Partnership. They had approached the city regarding the shortage of rental housing and its economic impact on the community. Earlier in 2024, they had requested the city collaborate with local nonprofit groups to submit applications to BC Housing's Community Housing Fund, which provides capital funding for the construction of new affordable housing projects. The city agreed to lease 2 sites to local nonprofits, contingent on their successful CHF applications and rezonings of the properties. And as I had mentioned, this is one of the 2 properties chosen. Getting into the endowment lands covenant, so I'm sure as we are all aware, these properties are part of the endowment lands that the city owns. In 1986, the province of BC gave the endowment lands to the city. At the time, housing was not contemplated, only educational, cultural, and recreational uses. In 2007, the city requested of the province that they amend the covenant to include housing. So since 2007, housing has been allowed on these properties along with all of the other endowment lands properties.
Can I just clarify that it is subsidized housing? That's correct, it's
It
not
is,
housing
yeah.
in general, it's subsidized, or as we might say now, non-market housing.
That is correct, through the chair to the councillor. Yes, subsidized housing would have been the nomenclature of the day, and now we typically call it affordable housing.
Thank you.
On this slide, I haven't outlined all of the OCP objectives and policies that are relevant. The full list are in your report. Just to highlight a couple of the more pertinent ones. Under the OCP objectives, it states that the number of new multi-unit residential dwelling units that may be developed in low-density residential neighborhoods will be considered on a case-by-case basis through amendments of the zoning bylaw and the OCP. Getting into a little bit more granular detail about the OCP policies, the two first bullets are probably the most relevant. The first one reads, townhouses and apartments will be directed towards East Fairview near the 10th Street campus, Mountain Lake Seniors, and at certain areas along Nelson and Anderson Street. It goes on to say areas considered appropriate for multi-unit residential development are areas in proximity to bus routes, commercial services, existing multi-unit residential, and major community uses like the hospital and the college. As well, there's a number of other supportive policies that talk about the city partnering with local nonprofit groups and leasing land to nonprofits as well for the purposes of housing. As well, the final policy that we wanted to highlight as well is that there's a policy within the OCP that states the city will expedite the approval process for development applications that contain affordable housing units. So on to the housing needs assessment. So to just give a very quick Coles notes of the housing needs assessment. So the most pressing issue that the housing needs assessment has identified is the need for both market and affordable rental housing in Nelson. In this slide, we've shown the housing needs targets for sort of three categories of rental housing: market units, affordable units, and deeply affordable units. And as you can see, if this project were to be approved ultimately by council, it would contribute significantly to the housing stock in Nelson. So in the case of market units, about 6% of the overall target, affordable units around 17%, as well as deeply affordable units around 18% of the goals that are identified in the needs assessment. When it comes to unit count, there has been quite a bit of discussion around this, and just for clarification's sake, the housing needs assessment has sort of two different goals when it comes to unit mix. So when it comes to affordable units, it does identify a greater need for studio and one bedrooms, and then secondarily 2-bedroom units. If you were to look at the goals for market units, market rental units, it does emphasize more 2 bedrooms. So we just want to sort of clarify that when it comes to affordable units, there's a greater need for those studios and 1 bedrooms. And on to the variance request. Before I get into the details of this slide, I just wanted to identify an error that's in the council report, where it says the building was moved to the southwest, so the left side of the screen. I should actually read southeast, which is the right-hand side of the screen. So when it comes to the variances, again, as I mentioned, there's 3 different variances. The front yard setback along Bell Street, the exterior side setback along 11th Street, and an increase in height. So as you can see from this diagram, the red dotted line is the setback. So if you were to completely follow the zoning bylaw setback requirements, the building should be contained within that red box. In this particular case, because they have moved the building to the southeast to accommodate some feedback that has been received by the neighbors, it has resulted in the canopy portion of the building meeting outside of that red box. So they're requesting those variances to accommodate that canopy. As well, there's the height as well to accommodate a smaller building footprint. So again, if they were to follow the zoning bylaw requirements for height, they would have a shorter and squatter building covering more of the lot. So again, to address neighborhood concerns, they have requested to increase the height to reduce that overall bulk of the building. So on to public engagement. So in attachment 4 and 5 of your council report, there was a summary of the public information session.
Councilor Woodward.
Thank you. Sorry, I think there was this the shadow analysis. It wasn't mentioned. I think that was kind of important for the neighbors, that there was minimal impact on neighboring properties.
Yes, thank you. Again, so staff have considered these variances reasonable. There was a shadow analysis that was completed and it indicates minimal impact on the neighboring properties. And it was actually a particular interest because with shadow analysis, they usually typically look at 4 times of the year. And in 2 cases, it said there'd be absolutely no impact because the entirety of Fairview is in a shadow because of the mountains.
Mm-hmm.
So there was a very small increase in the amount of shadow on a couple of the neighboring properties, but it was so minimal that if you were to look at the maps, you probably couldn't tell. As well, one of the things that sort of was not necessarily considered within the shadow analysis was that there are a number of existing trees along the west property line, and because of the height of those trees, they didn't calculate how much shadow the trees are already casting compared to what the building would be casting.
Thank you.
So again, public information session summary is in attachment 4 and 5. Staff have reviewed that and believe that the contents of that report accurately reflect the viewpoints that were expressed at that public information session. Prior to the application being received by Development Services in late November, we've received a number of different emails and in-person meetings with neighbors as well. Additionally, the application was presented to the Advisory Planning Commission on February 18th, and they provided a motion of support for this project. As well,
Can you speak to what the neighbors were saying?
there was a mix of viewpoints because they weren't necessarily, we didn't necessarily get consent from them. I can't necessarily give you the details of every single conversation, but there was a variety of viewpoints, some in support, some not. It's really difficult to say because it was prior to the application being received by staff, so we weren't really keeping track of those comments per se.
So since the application was received, there's been no public?
There have been some, but again, the issue that we have is that people email, but they don't necessarily provide any contact information, a name or an address or anything for us to sort of determine whether they're not an affected party. So that could be something that we could consider including in the public hearing package, but it would require us to reach out to each of those individuals. And I think we're in the neighborhood of maybe 15 to 20, so we'd have to kind of track them down, ask them their name, their address, and whether or not they consent to having their email, their letter included in the council package.
I'd appreciate that, and at the very least though, just to know the character of the feedback, like was it shadows or was it like, especially given what the proponent has done in terms of the modifications, what's the response to that? Like I'd like to know more.
For sure.
And I mean, the shadow report, this is the first time that I'd seen it. It was something that I had asked for. I think it is relevant to understand that. yeah, certainly makes a big difference, living in a mountain valley, how much sun we have access to, what that does to different aspects of our property as far as not only the enjoyment, if you're a gardener, there's just lots of things that are focused on that. So I was really grateful to see that in this report, and I'm gonna say it was less significant than I had originally thought. And all the factors being laid out like that made it easier for me to understand. So I hope the neighbors will have a chance to look at that.
Through the chair, I'll riff off that, since we're doing a little shadow riff, because I really enjoy it. I know that we don't always get all the technical reports, but thank you, love it. One thing I know from my own experience living in a shadowed house is that even when we're not blocking the direct sun, sometimes another building or an awning, or my ex-husband put a grapevine thing, it blocks the sky. And blocking the sky does block light, and I know that's probably not the technical aspect of a shadow study, but I think it's important to recognize that. And so even if you're blocking just like that noon on December 21st, if it happened to have been sunny that day, that's really frustrating for the person to whom it is, who it affects, right? And so just to note that shadow studies are what they are, but then also blocking the refraction in the sky matters as well.
I just had a question actually. It's sort of broken down here with the key themes from respondents, and I'm curious to know if there's a way of breaking this down in sort of just more generally positive or negative terms, so that, you know, if it says that 18 people said it was meeting community needs and that's 33%, and 18 people said it was too tall and they didn't want it, is also 33%. Is there a sense of people like, you know, are we at 60-40, or are we at, you know, just generally positive, or generally, like, there's many different responses here, but they could all sort of fall into generally supportive or generally not. Could we get a sense of where we're at with that overall?
For sure, if council refers to, actually, I don't have the page number of the PDF, but the page before that chart, there is they call it a response sentiment.
Okay.
So it says 54% or 29% of the comments received were supportive.
66 of the PDF.
I see.
Oh, thank you,
Seeing it
66,
now.
yes. So 54% or 29 people were supportive. 24% or 13 people were opposed or concerned. 15% or 8 people were opposed and concerned but acknowledged the need for affordable housing. And then 7% or 4 people were opposed or concerned just generally about increased density across the city.
So just to be clear, the read is about 29-25. Leaning pro versus leaning opposed.
Yeah, 46 altogether.
46%
46%.
opposed and 54% supportive at the open house.
And my last question, and it might be captured in here somewhere, there's a lot of information here, so I apologize if it's already in here, but this is just people, this is the direct neighborhood, or this is just people citywide, or where do these people that responded to this, where do they come from generally?
For sure, so this particular report is just for the public information meeting that was held in January. We don't have specific addresses, but if you look at the very end of that report, in the summary, again, I don't have the page number, but the very end, it gives a summary of whether or not they were a property owner, what age group they fell into, that sort of thing as well. They generally don't ask for addresses, nor would we disclose addresses as part of a public report. It's very similar to what we do with public hearings. So we don't have that information, but we do have the age group and whether or not they're a renter or owner.
Thank you. Is there, yes, Councilor Page.
So looking at the feedback, and hearing the feedback, big theme of it is it's too big. So if we wanna go through and approve variances but not height, then have them go back and envision that's a 4-story building and the impacts that would have. What does that look like? Aside from business cases and the machinations of political governing bodies that may or may not make decisions based on that decision, what does that look like if we're comfortable with a building that's inside the height pocket?
It's still a variance, 3 feet, 3 stories now is the currently accepted, isn't
Generally, three stories, it's
Right now, from my
13 meters, and 1 story is about 3.3 meters, give or take.
it? I just wanna be clear, cause if we go to 4 stories, it's still a variance.
I would be
Yeah.
open to considering a variance of a meter or so, to bleed into
Just
like
wanna be clear.
better than 5.
Yeah, so that would be something that we would have to discuss with the applicant to see if they're willing to move forward with that. I will note, again, as I mentioned in the presentation, that the OCP and the zoning bylaw amendment would have to be approved by council first. And then once the R4 zoning is in place, council would then consider the variance. So sort of a decision would have to be made on that first. But if that is sort of the direction that council is looking to go, we'd wanna have a conversation with the applicant first to see if they're willing to move forward with the current iteration of the application.
Thank you. Through the chair, so I was under the impression that BC Housing has stipulations on scale of buildings and funding. And my concern is that if we go down this road, BC Housing will just be like, I'm sorry, we're not gonna fund this project because it's not efficient. That's what I understood.
Supplemental,
Sure, yeah.
just through the chair, just so I'm clear with my position, where timelines allow for it, I think we need to have a high build, 5-story versus 4-story discussion in and of itself. And if that requires a conversation with the proponent, I think that's a conversation worthy to be had. I think that gets at the nut of quite a lot of the sentiment I see in the open house in the report, and when we're thinking about how we're chipping away at, 5 to 7 to 10% of our need every year and having a pipeline of projects coming through, then I look at this and I say, let's really know, versus I do have concerns too that it would be the go or no go for BC Housing, but I think I need to see a building that's 4 stories and a building that's 5 stories and make the call of how much risk I would put to that. And I think the organization needs to have that conversation too amongst themselves, because I think that extra floor is part of the issue, and I'm fully aware that I was like, fill the pocket. And I think it's a difference in scale up there.
Can I just clarify? So I think what you heard from our planning staff was, there's a possibility of accommodating 40 units. It's gonna be a larger lot coverage on that property. So we just need to be clear, is council open to having greater lot coverage, so a squatter building, but the same size building effectively? Or are you saying a smaller building overall?
We have Councillor Lochtenberg and then Councillor Banger.
Did you wanna?
I think I've said you can riff.
I'd be a smaller building overall.
So is that, what's the,
And
we'll ultimately need a consensus of.
both smaller and similar footprint. I think the question I have, a couple questions. First is, has in your interactions with the proponent or you yourselves, just to be clear, have you talked to the climbing gym?
Sorry.
The climbing gym.
Climbing gym, no,
I'll take
we
that as a
haven't, they're not an applicant, so staff have generally had conversations with the gym, but not specifically about this
Okay.
project or this property.
The reason why I'm asking, and I've raised this before, so this is not the first time I'm raising it, I've even talked to the proponent about it. The climbing gym has property across the street of virtually identical in so many ways. They're both part of the endowment lands, they're both would accommodate this building. But there's a potential here for a win-win-win. The climbing gym doesn't care if it's on one side of the street or the other. It's a smaller building. It doesn't have like balconies or people overlooking housing. So it might be the win-win-win that we need for this. And so I'm curious, given that you're hearing some opposition, we've clearly heard opposition from the neighborhood. And then having spent quite a bit of time walking that property, walking the neighborhood, looking up, and just trying to imagine if this is my own, if I lived here, if this was my neighborhood, how would I feel? I think we really need to take this seriously. This is people's lives, it's their homes, and so just to explore that question seems worth it. And so what I would like to see before I can support this project is to explore that option. The second thing, if that's, for some reason, if we go down that road, it's not doable, and I don't see why it wouldn't be doable. Like I said, everything about it looks like, hey, this could really work for everybody involved. But if it's not, then I definitely take seriously the concerns of the neighborhood in terms of not just the shadow, that's an issue, and as Councillor Tate said, it's more than just the sun. It's also just the presence of that mass. That's a major change to those homes and to that neighborhood. So I definitely am concerned.
Just in response to that, so staff's role here is to move forward with the direction that's been provided by council. So as I'm sure council is aware, a motion was passed back in July to potentially lease this property to share, and staff are moving forward with that direction. So I think, and maybe I'll defer to the city manager, but we would need some sort of other direction, because right now what is on the books is for us to process a development application for these specific properties.
Yep, I hear that, and I would put this to the chair and to council to provide that direction. I don't think it costs anybody much at all. And further to this point, I think that this engagement, this willingness to consider options that will provide potentially a win-win for everybody in the neighborhood is something we're kind of duty bound to do. So
There an amend, like,
I
call it
would
an amendment?
I would make a motion, I would put forward a motion to ask staff to. But we don't have a motion on the floor, there's no motion on the floor.
It's just a
So,
discussion.
this is a discussion, so so I'm not interrupting the regular order, I'm in line with regular orders, I'd like
yeah,
to put forward a
just-
motion.
Yeah,
To
clarify
direct
that.
staff.
Yeah, clarify that, Ken is quite right. Our staff was directed to explore this site, and if council wants us to explore a different site, we do need to hear from council that that's your direction, and we certainly will take that. And again, probably clarity, or, was council open to basically this design? I don't know how much it would change moving it to the other side of the street, but people are comfortable with a 5-story building on the other side of the street. I've also heard, people wanted to know what a squatter building might be on this site.
Is
Wow.
that shorter, not squatter?
I haven't heard that yet, so.
Well, I said shorter, not squatter.
Yeah,
just
so anyway, we.
It's the only way you can get the 48 units is to a squatter.
I don't wanna muddy it with, I think if we go forward and say, before we get to third reading, I'd like to see what the option looks like that's less height. And I think I wanna leave the flexibility with, I wanna leave the flexibility with staff and the proponent to have conversations if they want to, if they can, if that's possible, about when I get to third reading, I wanna see what they come back with that's shorter. And if they wanna push squatter because they're thinking they can't make it a go otherwise, they can make that case. But I wanna see less intrusion beyond the pocket that anyone should expect that was there before. I'm okay with some, I just think when I see 5 meters beyond, it's too much beyond the pocket. So if I see 5 meters beyond on the lateral side, I'm also probably gonna be pretty uncomfortable if we're getting out of the pocket so much,
Yeah, I
the
think-
envelope that does exist.
Yeah, I think if you
But
look.
I think you guys have to figure that conversation out with the proponent to see what that second version looks like.
So we will need a resolution if you're asking us to look at one or both those options, to discuss that with the proponent.
I'll make that motion.
Can I comment first? Yes.
Well, once it's on the floor.
One second. Can we go with Councillor Woodward, Councillor Payne, and then we'll come back to you?
So I'm really disturbed at what's happening here, you guys. I mean, this is like, we are way down the road, we gave staff direction like 6 months ago. We've gone through all the processes. We've worked with the proponents and the neighborhood. And I'm sort of thrown here that all of a sudden now, it's like moving the building, changing the building. I mean, this is like, this should have happened 6 months ago or 4 months ago. I mean, they're really far down the road now. And I just feel like, are we now threatening this entire project? Cause I mean, that is like 48 units of housing for people who really need it in this town, workers who, I mean, you guys all know this very, very clearly, that we're in a housing crisis, have been for 15 years.
Of course.
We're making headway now, the last 5-6 years. And I'm kind of stunned that this council would consider just sort of like tossing this project into the chaos bin, and who knows what's gonna happen. I mean, it just seems, I just don't understand it. I thought we were quite clear, we got feedback from the neighbors and citizens. This staff has adjusted the building to do the best they can, but now I feel like you guys are throwing this into the wind. I just don't understand.
Councillor Payne, did you wanna add to that?
I do, because I believe I read in this report, and maybe it's previously, that the original 48 unit proposal was for 4 stories, but because it took up more of the lot coverage, in deference to suggestions from the neighborhood, that's when they moved it back to a smaller footprint with another story. Am I mistaken in that? I thought there was a 4-story building. Okay, I'm seeing a head nod from someone who knows. So that's just one piece of data. I'm pretty sure I read it in the report that we got. The second thing I want to mention is, so I don't know what the lot coverage was on that, but the way this sits right now, it could be developed as an institutional building, 3 stories, and what's the maximum lot coverage they could do on that? I'm sorry to
It would
ask
have
that.
15-meter setback if it was residential adjacent.
Okay. So that's gonna give them a 60% lot coverage
That's what
then?
I-4 is. It has 15-meter setback residential adjacent.
We would have to look at the zoning.
So without any changes right now, there could be a fairly massive building on that. I just wanna make sure that we're understanding all the components here. That was something that I hadn't understood until I went through this, 100-page plus report. But I'm pretty sure they started off with a 4-story building. So I just wanna make it really, really clear that yes, there are costs involved with moving it across the street. And I also believe that the first rule of holes is if you find you're in the wrong one, stop digging. So there's a couple of components there. But let's just make sure that we're looking at all of these factors. And I don't know where that happens in this process, because we do have a public consultation between tonight and third reading. Is that not when it's scheduled? We're recommending to staff to set that up?
That is My understanding of the process is that if this
So
goes
that's-
forward tonight, first and second reading, there's a public hearing and then a third reading, at which point
At that exact same moment, though. There's no gap between the public hearing and the third vote. Is that not true?
That's up to council.
Okay.
Yeah, so basically, in terms of fair process to the public, when council makes a final decision on zoning, there should not be any new information to council, so that is why we tend to do a public hearing and then third and adoption, so that there's not a gap that new information comes in and then we have to, share that with the public and potentially, if it's significant, have another public hearing. So that's why we do that process. It's not required that you do that. So just to be clear on that.
Please.
I would also add that if council were to approve first and second reading tonight, that would give Macola an opportunity to speak before council and provide additional details, particularly around the economic feasibility and the reason for the additional height and setbacks and that sort of thing. So staff's recommendation would be to move forward, so council can receive that additional information and the public can also receive that information as well.
And you could do that with the direction that we see the clear option between tall and squat.
I think you really are in two paths. Do you wanna go through the public hearing and hear broader from the community before you make a decision whether you wanna look at other options? Or do you feel at this stage you wanna look at that? I don't think it would be fair to to put them through a public hearing based on the current proposal if there's no appetite from council to approve that current project. So if you're open to the current project, then I would say go ahead with the public hearing, hear what the feedback you get from the broader community. If you're saying at this stage, we're not comfortable with that, we don't wanna go, we're not, whatever happens could potentially happen at the public hearing is probably not gonna change my mind, so I wanna see some other options, then I would suggest you direct staff to work with the proponent to look at those other options.
Just as an option, would it be possible to refer it back to staff with direction to investigate those and then come back for first and second?
Well, that's what would be on the table now.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, you wouldn't do first and second now, you would refer, you would pass a resolution for us to look at these other options, and that would come back to council, and then we would, whatever project that you're comfortable with would go forward to the public hearing. There obviously could be a fairly significant delay for them to figure out, how they kind of fit this building either on that same site with less, with a 4-story building, or although I think they did some work at least massing on that, so they maybe be able to come back with a sort of massing type study. I don't know if you can just pick the current building up and put it on that other site. That may be possible, and I'm not sure about that. That's basically what we'd be looking for.
You as well, yeah. Councillor Lockenberg and then Councillor Tate.
So I'd like to move that we refer this back to staff with direction to explore the lot across the street with the climbing gym, as well as the height.
With the current height and.
The current height is gonna be fine across the street, so you can.
I just wanted to be clear, yeah.
The best chance of success, again, win-win-win, to get the size of the building we want is likely across the street. But if we're gonna stay on this side of the street, then I'd also like to know, as Councillor Page says, what the 4th story looks like.
Do we need to have more comments first, or?
Well, we
No,
need a
just- we need a
second.
second.
On the proprietary.
Yeah, is there a second for that then?
Not that one. I would like to refer it to staff to simply look.
So we need to,
Yeah.
so you need to determine if there, no one
There is
willing to
no
second.
more, there is no second for that, so we're moving back into discussion then.
I'd like to refer it. I'd like to refer with direction to look at different options on that site specifically. I think part of what we're trying to do is accomplish the best building on that site, regardless of, like, each of these properties is an opportunity to create a great building. So I think a shorter building is something I wanna see serious consideration of. I need to see more details to compare the two and pick a path that makes most sense. So I would refer it with just the direction of taller or squatter.
Is there a second for that?
We've just been there, that's what I'm confused about.
Different referral.
No, we've seen what the 4-story on that site looks like, and that was the initial feedback from the community. That was not,
Okay, we're getting a little out of control here, so.
it's just confusing.
Councillor
I feel like we're
Lautenberg's
going
motion was not successful. Councillor
Secondary,
Page,
no secondary on mine.
was so neither of these go forward, so we're back to the original agenda item, is that correct?
As far as I can tell.
Still on the original agenda.
We're still on the original agenda item. Nothing's shifted now.
We haven't even moved it yet.
So,
Yeah.
well, I'd like to move number 1 then, on the original agenda item.
Do we have a seconder?
Guys.
Because this kind of speaks to.
Okay, so can I just make a comment here?
You may.
I'm really confused as to what's happening here. I'm really unsure, and I'm really surprised that this is happening.
Point of order, if the motion doesn't have a second,
Yeah, let's.
it's done, we
Totally.
move on. There's no, we're not debating.
Well,
We're rushing things. Let's.
Councilor Woodward, are you
Well, I just,
done?
Moved it.
I've asked for number 1 to be moved, and there's nobody, this is not my motion, this is the motion that's recommended by staff. No one is seconding this.
Right, this is the original motion, what is in front
The
of us.
recommendation.
Yes, recommendation of staff. You're moving the recommendation of
I'm
staff.
moving the recommendation that's on our agenda package, number 1, by staff.
I'm not ready yet to second it.
And so we
Well,
need
I'll
to,
second it for discussion.
okay, we have a,
Just to get us out of this.
perfect. We have a seconder, we have a mover, we have a seconder, Councilor Woodward is moving, Councilor Page is seconding, and now we can discuss further.
Could we read the motion again, please?
I'll read the motion. That the
Oh,
official,
is this the original motion?
this is the original
Oh my
motion.
God, I thought this was a,
Okay, well, I'm just gonna read it for the public.
thank you.
This is number 1, this is from our agenda package, it's a recommendation from staff. That the official community plan amendment, Fell Street bylaw number 3632, 2025 be introduced and read a first and second time by title only.
Thanks much. This was really big. I spent a lot of hours on it. I really appreciate it. A couple of things in my comments have already been referred to, which is great. One thing I noticed in the OCP principles is that there's in the original, the 2013, it's so interesting, and I kind of chatted with everybody about this before. So 2013, at the beginning of that OCP, it actually says that the population in Nelson had not changed for the last 2 census periods. So it's so interesting, the different contexts we find ourselves in now. And also all of those bullet points in the OCP at that time seemed like pie in the sky, I think, with this like ideas of affordable housing and everyone's and releasing city land for subsidized housing and to work with community partners, and it just being a quasi newbie, I find it really interesting how long it takes to get to a place where it becomes practice and becomes something that's like part of the community vernacular. So the process for me is really interesting. One piece of that 2013 that I didn't think was in the report, but referred specifically to townhouses and low-rise apartments in Fairview, and that they would be located near the healthcare facilities and the college. Interesting. So R4 is 13 meters high and up to 45% lot coverage. And based on what we've been given by staff and our own direction over the past 6 to 8 months, it looks to me like this location is a very good location for this type of project, which is why it came up in the first place. So in principle, I'm like, yeah, I'm rolling with the punches here. It does make sense. I am really concerned, and I've said this at 2 other meetings, about pushing the drawing forward without this chance for the iteration, without this chance to adapt the design, and to go to the next reading without saying, I need to see what it looks like, where it's within that 13 meters, and whether that's not 4 stories because of the roof and such. Fine. And if it's time for us to update our zoning bylaws to like start to incorporate taller buildings, then we need to look at that. I am not comfortable with every project that comes to this table that it comes with a development variance permit. What's the point of having a box to build in that our experts built that box in the first place if the proponents come and they have really good reasons, but right? So from my perspective, the R4 box is a sufficient box. And I want to address the Macola rezoning application. On attachment 2, page 18, it says, Council investigated preliminary massing options. And I don't believe that is true. I don't believe there was more than one option that we investigated. So I want to be careful with that sentence. The second half of that sentence is,
Did you want, just from staff, I thought we had some massing things that we brought forward.
We just saw the big chunk. I don't recall options.
I don't recall options either.
Okay.
Yeah.
No problem. And this isn't what you wrote, this is what
No, yeah.
Macola wrote. And it also said, and provided direction to maximize opportunities for housing on the site. So I've watched that video of our meeting, and I believe that there was some indicator from some of council of like, we need housing. But I think providing direction to maximize is a stretch of what I picked up from rewatching the video. So I want to be honest about that and make sure that we're careful in how we're represented in these reports that are now recorded in perpetuity. I recall that I said, that looks big. That's what I said in that video. I was wearing a purple shirt, I remember. Okay, so having said that, this whole concept of maximization, I think it leans into this for-profit housing principles, and this is not for-profit housing, this is non-market housing. So there's an argument here that 48 units, and unless BC Housing shows us that 48 units or some kind of percentage is required, it seems to me to be purely speculative that the 48 units is what is needed in order to otherwise it would weaken the likelihood of success for BC Housing. So from my perspective, that feels speculative because we haven't seen that written down somewhere from BC Housing, and I haven't been given any like direction that it needs to take a certain chunk out of the housing needs report and so on and so forth. So even though the argument itself is a valid argument that a certain number of units reduces costs in construction and operation, and reduced costs in construction and operations means that we'd be more likely to get the funding, that argument itself is valid, but the premises themselves are not sound because we don't know for sure that that is what BC Housing is relying on in order to approve it. So with the motion on the table and the 2 referrals that I've heard, my recommendation is to not pass this motion on the table and refer to getting back into that R4 with the height and the setbacks appropriately. I love that you moved it over a little, that's really kind. And so I'm not sure where to go with that. Thank you. To Steph.
Just to address through the chair of the council, just to address the concern about the box sort of painted with that R4.
Yeah.
And you'll hear it often from planners, but the zoning is essentially out of date because it was written at a time when you could only build up to 4 stories wood frame construction. And since 2013, the building codes have been updated, and the sort of common thing that you'll see in zoning bylaws now is 6 stories because you can now build up to 6 stories wood frame construction. So we agree that we've sort of painted people into a box with the zoning, but the zoning is often out of date. In this particular case, it is because it doesn't reflect current building codes. And to the question about the CHF application, sort of the reasoning behind staff requesting first and second reading and scheduling of the public hearing is to give Macola and Share that opportunity to address those questions about the CHF and the funding. From my own experience, I have extensive experience with BC Housing and CHF, but I'm not here to sort of speak on their behalf. So we want to kind of give them that opportunity to speak directly to council and answer those questions about whether or not 3 stories or 4 stories would be economically viable.
And I just want to point out that this is not an area of expertise for me. I don't know that this is an area of expertise for either of the proponents developing these projects, but it is for Macola Developments. They do these projects all over the province, and they have a very good understanding, in my experience, of working with them and meeting with them at different conferences of what constitutes success in these applications from their long experience of doing it. So if they say the 48 units, then I am gonna go with that expertise and experience that is being paid for out of the funding that BC Housing has provided. So I just wanted to add that in. I don't know how many units is the right number of units, but they've done this dozens of times. So I'm pretty sure that they're our best expert on this.
Councillor Lochtenberg.
Yeah, through the chair, we're not a rubber stamp council. Like, we're not dependent on decisions made or directions made in the past. If not, then what's the point of any of this? We should just rubber stamp this all the way through. We're here to clear the slate of everything that's happened in the past and look at this with fresh eyes, looking out for trying to balance the interests of the community with the neighborhood. And I think some of the hesitation is not that we're opposing housing or we're trying to muddy the waters or any of that. What we're all trying to do is find the best path forward for everybody. And we're in a unique position that staff is not in, that Macola's not in, that BC Housing's not in which we're elected to represent those people in Fairview as much as we are to represent the city itself. And from that unique lens and in this unique moment, we have to consider what is uniquely our perspective on this, what's best as well as we can see it. And I think what I would argue is that we don't have enough information to make that decision. We simply don't. I certainly don't. When I go down, and just because we made some decisions early on and we gave some direction, then we gather information. The reason why we did pre-development funding was to gather information and to learn more. If we were gonna make this decision this way all along, then what's the point of any of that information gathering? What's the point of doing public engagement if we're not willing to change our minds? We're always supposed to sit at this table willing to change our minds. And in this case, looking with fresh eyes at this project, I would like to know more. I would like to know about 4 stories versus 6 stories. I would like to get a better sense of what willingness we all have to try to work with that neighborhood to come up with a better solution. As it stands now, if we were to vote on it now, I would definitely be voting no because of that. But I want to vote yes. And to vote yes, I think it's wise, it's prudent, it's better for everybody to defeat this motion so that we can come up with something better.
I have a question in that vein, sort of maybe for you guys. Just procedurally, like if we go forward, first and second reading, there's a public consultation, and then there's a third reading immediately. that's one way to go, or to not go forward now, amend, go refer and ask that there's some different options presented. With that first option where we go forward to first and second and then ultimately to third right away, does that give us any room to change things, or are we going to end up in a situation where we potentially lose, like we have to say no to it because it isn't changed and it hasn't satisfied some of these things, whereas, and I don't get the sense that anybody on this table wants to say no to more housing. I think we need more housing, we need to make sure that it's the right fit for the right place, and any housing, in my mind, in some ways, like if it's less housing, it's still better than no housing. So I just don't wanna get to the point where we kind of paint ourselves into a corner and have to say no. So I would just ask, in your expertise, what is the best way to go forward and to keep most options on the table and to actually get us to a good place where we're gonna actually move forward with a project that works?
For sure, so there would be two options for council, either to vote to table the matter until a future date, and then that would allow council to pass a further motion to provide direction to staff to look into other options, or council could pass only first reading of both of the bylaws and then direct staff to come back with second reading with that additional information.
Can we not pass first and second reading? We just don't have to pass the resolution to go to public hearing, right?
Either way, yeah, first and second.
Because if we're at first and second, it can be amended at third and for the public hearing, so I think you can do first and second reading here. You don't have to send it to public hearing at this stage. You can give us direction to, because right now we're saying zone the property R4, right? That's all we're saying in first and second reading.
That's
right, so that advances the project. However it looks at the end of the day, I think that's a positive step. If you're not comfortable going to public hearing now, don't refer it to public hearing. We can work with the proponent. Hearing some mixed messages around kind of what you want, but
Just didn't get to what we want yet.
yeah, so I'm not clear on, I guess we need some direction on
So
what
what I'm
those
hearing
options
in the
you want.
answer to my question is that there's options further on,
Yeah,
even
if
though
you do
we
first and
pass
second.
first and second, we still have these options to bring more options to the table.
That is correct, and that's why we've separated out into three separate resolutions. So, and thank you for the clarity to the city manager. Yes, so council could approve first and second reading of the OCP amendment zoning, but then they could vote to have the public hearing or not have the public hearing, which is item 3 there.
Okay, thank you. We're gonna go with Rick, but just before I do that, Mayor Morrison, did you have anything you wanted to add after Rick?
No, you guys have finally worked it through there, is that we're talking about the fact that nothing can be built the way it sits right now. It needs to be rezoned to something. R4, the recommendation seems to be the appropriate thing to rezone it to. We need to get at least one step done, and then we can duke it out about whether or not we're looking at squat, tall, skinny, fat, what the site is. We can definitely then ask for more. And the thing is to not be going to the public hearing, because if you went to the public hearing and you then had that, then you would have to vote on whatever you did before. We wouldn't be getting any new information if you don't refer this back with some direction. But I think you finally have come around to where you are. You can do 1 and 2, and it could end up just dying right there at the very end of the day, but do 1 and 2. Get your zoning so you know what the footprint at a minimum is going forward.
Thank you. Rick, did you have something?
Yeah, I just want to be careful in how we I worry, because I've seen it happen many times, is we make one step and that puts us closer to the next step and to the next step. Let's just be very clear here, we're asking staff to look at a few options. So whether we do one or two, I think the public is gonna see that as a tacit or the beginning of approval. I think it's just more clear if we say, let's just defeat it, refer to staff and bring it back. It doesn't change the timeline or the trajectory, but it's certainly
Yeah,
easier
it
for
does.
communication.
Significantly.
It doesn't significantly.
It does.
No,
Sure.
because we can bring them back to vote on first and second reading at a future time
I'm going with
quite
you.
easily. There's nothing, what is the timeline to bring this forward at a special meeting, let alone at the next meeting? One way or the other, we're coming to a next meeting, so
I think
we defeat it, you bring it back for 1 and 2 at the
I
next
think
meeting.
the idea is to, do you want housing on this lot? That's what you're voting on. You're comfortable with R4. I heard Councillor Tate, can we make it work just with no variances or whatever? So you're advancing this. I guess I don't see any reason why not to advance that. If options come back that none of them that you like, you defeat it at third reading and it goes nowhere, right? So
Yeah. To be clear, and again, to be clear, we're looking for the best possible outcome. The greater likelihood that something gets developed. That's what we're looking for.
Yeah.
And if we are not careful, we're gonna push ourselves into a corner where we end up voting and undermining the whole process. So that's what we're trying to avoid here. And I'm fine to go with 1 and 2, but I recognize, and I put this out there very clearly, by passing 1 and 2, we're sending out a statement that this is the beginning of an approval process. And it's very hard, I don't know if it's ever happened in all of my time here, that we haven't then, if we've done 1 and 2, we've gone on to do 3 in adoption. So
I think the strong signal is, yes, we wanna see housing on this lot.
maybe not.
No,
I would
that would
say-
be the signal.
I
that
know
you're-
I'm just one person, but I would love to vote for something. But if we haven't explored not just the 4, but make a phone call, talk to them, find out. Is it possible to move it across the street?
Well, you need-
I don't understand why you wouldn't do that. So,
I think you need that in your second resolution, you put that forward, you can put that forward again. Right now, council's prepared to look at this lot as housing, but you can try again around looking at moving it. But I think that's the second part. So the first part, first and second readings of these, and then what options do you want us to bring back?
I recognize what Councillor Lochtenberg is talking about, the perception that 1 and 2 is just a slippery slope to 3, and that is definitely historically the way things have gone. But if I'm hearing correctly, it's not necessarily the way things have to go.
No.
So I think, just because that's the way it's been doesn't mean that's the way it is. I think we can, move forward in some capacity with this, in the sense that I think everybody around the table here, and mostly, I think most people, not all, but most people in the community recognize that we want and need more housing. So if this is the next step to having that conversation about what goes on that lot, then let's do that. And also keep in mind that it's completely within our procedural power to say no to something that doesn't work ultimately. So it will just, what I'm hoping is that this first and second is an incentive to come up with something that really works for everybody before third. And what I'm hearing is that's possible.
Okay, I'm gonna move number 1 then.
It was already moved, seconded.
Okay.
Okay, let's call the question. All those in favor?
Okay, before,
I
hold
think
on.
you should read that.
Yes, hold on. So
I think
this
I have
is,
it memorized.
I'm just gonna state it again, this is number 1 on the agenda package, recommendation from staff. That official community plan amendment, Fell Street bylaw number 3632, 2025 be introduced and read a first and second time by title only.
All those in favor? And it passes.
So, and then I have to do number 2, yes? Okay, so number 2, same thing, recommendations from staff, number 2. So I'm putting on the floor,
Second,
seconded by Councillor Page, number 2.
on zoning.
That zoning amendment L Street bylaw number 3633 2025 be introduced and read a first and second time by title only.
All those in favor? Okay. Do those opposed wanna be declared?
Well, not necessarily, if they don't vote opposed, then they're in favor.
He didn't
And I
say
didn't-
opposed.
Yeah.
And I didn't
yeah.
say opposed, and I'm just hold on a second, I may
He
have
didn't give us a
question.
chance.
Yeah, no, he has to ask whether you opposed.
So, sorry, what happened there?
I just didn't ask for the opposed vote yet,
Ask for
it's
the
my
opposed
fault,
Slow down,
it's okay,
just take a sec.
you got it.
Okay.
All those opposed? Okay. And a no,
Yeah, if you don't put your hand up, then you're in favor.
okay. So that passes as well. Is there a separate thing for is there a separate motion for the public hearing?
So we're,
No, or there might be, but I'd like to make a motion to refer to staff to explore with the proponent the height, and just explore, based on this conversation, explore the height, make the phone call, just do that. Like, why not?
I think maybe you wanna do those in 2 separate ones, cause we didn't seem to get there when we tried them
Okay.
together, but that's up to you.
so what are you asking, Councillor Lockenberg?
So I'm gonna make 2 motions, I'll start with the first one, unless somebody else wants to make it. The first motion is to direct staff to explore with the proponent, to bring back to us options for 4 stories.
To Kate's point, something that fits in the.
Yeah, and something that fits.
Well,
in
I
the
think we need to be careful, or we need direction, like our number one, I think Councillor Tate said, I think our staff said you can't fit a 4-story building within 13 meters, so 4 stories is still gonna be a variance, a height variance. So that's the first part.
So my resolution will be 4 stories within the current envelope, proposed envelope.
I think it's the width.
With the footprint, sorry.
So-
4 stories in the front.
Can I just again clarify, are you looking at lot coverage or all the setbacks? Because we heard from the public that moving it away from the houses is towards the street is a positive.
Yeah.
So is it lot coverage or is it staying within with no changes in setbacks?
Well, if my understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, but that they've made, from what I can tell, and is they've made a number of improvements and concessions to the neighborhood, so it looks like the footprint is the best footprint for that lot.
So it's outside the setbacks.
It's outside the setbacks, which I think is fine.
Okay.
Like really, we're talking about the height and the,
Yeah, so you want same lot coverage, but we can you'd be open to varying the setbacks? Go ahead, Ken.
So then
just-
we'll lose 20% of the units.
Just
Well,
as
not
a
necessarily.
point of clarification, the building itself meets the setbacks, it's in that red box. The only reason for the setback variances is for the canopy. So if we were to go back to the proponent, they could just simply remove the canopy and the building would still be allowed to be in that exact same location.
What I'm hearing is council's comfortable with, being in that setback area if that moves it away from the housing. What I'm hearing is you wanna see, it's more lot coverage than, and I don't think we lose 20% of the thing, like we can build where the parking area is, there's gonna be more covered parking, that's all.
You want it on the same footprint.
and the one of the.
So
No, no.
she's saying not
No,
to
no,
build
the-
it into the parking lot.
Yeah.
Lot coverage, not the same.
I see, when
footprint
you're
as a
including the
3-story.
parking in the lot
Yeah,
coverage.
yeah.
Oh, I didn't know you included parking and lot coverage. Is that part of the 39%?
I'm just saying, they can accommodate the building can fit where the parking is, I think, and still get that 45% or whatever. Is that what we are, 45%?
45%, so it would be more lot coverage.
It's 39 right now, I think.
So I think we can go to 45, so the building would be 6% larger than present.
And
Anyway, I think we need to bring back some options of.
Can I hear what the motion is?
Yes, please.
Well, I mean, when you're referring to staff, as long as staff gets the understanding of what
So you're just,
conversation.
so the third part of this is refer to staff? Is that what it is?
Effectively, refer to staff to explore options given the basis of the
Four-story.
conversation we have, 4 stories.
So instead of the public hearing, we're gonna have a third piece that says refer to staff?
We're gonna have a fourth piece too. Potentially, yeah.
And potentially a 4th.
Yes.
And then not pass number 3.
So the first resolution is to explore a 4-story building on that site.
Yeah.
Okay.
There it is. Is there a second? I don't know.
Is there a seconder for that motion?
I think from my perspective, I would like to better understand the 48 units because for me, it's a bit speculative that this is what is required and I acknowledge the expertise in the room and I also bring up my favorite phrase, this is a proposal from a proponent. And so even the experts are going to lean into what the proponents want. So I would like just more information on that because it seems to me to be applying this maximization, these for-profit principles in what is intended to be a community good.
So we can go back to the proponent or the consultant to, for them to give that rationale of.
She did.
Alright, so sorry, you guys, what did you just do?
She seconded.
Okay, great. So
And made this a point,
some stuff.
which is great.
yes, it's going to be going back to staff with a request to come up with options, basically.
Well, the option you've asked us to come up with is a 4-story building on this site.
With the same footprint.
That's not what I heard.
That's what I thought you said.
Lot coverage.
Okay.
Because of the parking.
We have a motion, a second. Can we have a vote on that motion, please?
Which is?
Want me to read the resolution?
Yes.
That council directs staff to explore with the proponent options for a 4-story building on the proposed lot.
Within the lot coverage.
In the proposed lot coverage.
Which is 45%
4-story building within the proposed.
instead of the current 39. Is that what you're intending?
The proposed
R4.
lot coverage.
I prefer R4, but it sounds like the 4 stories goes over, so I'm willing to see the options, yeah.
Councilor
I
Payne.
just want to clarify that one of the highest stated needs for our community, community-wide, is more housing. So,
Can I maybe ask that council broaden that? So, cause I'm hearing some wanna see, can we still get 48 units in this building? I'm hearing some are saying that. So I think you wanna be up, and I'm hearing people wanna see options, so what is the lot coverage to get 48 in a or as close to 48 as we can in a 4-story building? And you know, how many units would you lose if you stayed within the 45%? I think both of those would be good information for council to see.
So
That assessment?
that council directs staff to explore with the proponent options for a 4-story building within the proposed lot coverage
Yeah.
and
I think just,
it's
I
4-story
think we're
building.
fine with the 4-story building.
Okay.
So that is the motion?
Yeah.
And it's been seconded by Councillor Lockenberg and Councillor Tate?
Options for a 4-story.
Okay.
So can we call that?
Okay, and
All
just,
those-
sorry, before you call it, just so you hear it, the council directs staff to explore with proponent options for a 4-story building.
Options is the key word there, I
Yeah.
think.
Yeah, but you've heard this conversation.
All those in favor? All those opposed? Okay.
What's the mayor voting?
Mayor Morrison, do you have something to say about this?
No, you guys are working your way through it. I'm fine with, we're gonna some more information back about what fits on an R4. And I think that's kind of where we're trying to get to here, and along with meeting some of the concerns of the neighborhood.
So we have 3 votes for
and then
We have
2
4
opposed.
I think the mayor has.
The mayor has not voted, so
She asked who was,
Yeah,
acting mayor asked who was opposed, she didn't vote, she's in favor.
it's
Of this
unanimous, it's 4 to 2, basically.
Well, 5 to 2 passes.
Sure. Okay, so that's passed.
Excellent.
Thank you.
You're gonna make another motion? I mean, I can't.
Seriously?
Whether or not I get a second, we'll see. Yeah, I'd like to also refer to staff to make a phone call and begin, or at least explore the possibility of what it would take to move across the street. I feel like I'm in crazy town, or I'm going crazy because I don't understand why we wouldn't do this. I just don't, especially given it might be a better way to get 6 stories and 40 units because it doesn't block anybody's sight. It addresses, it's a better spot. I think if we were to start over again, we would have chosen that spot.
Before we get a debate.
Fair enough.
Sure. Can we have a second for this motion?
Thank you.
Councillor Tate.
I apologize, but.
Any discussion? Councillor Tate.
My curiosity about this idea, which is just percolating in my head, is that it opens a can of worms of why not that Kiwanis lands at the bottom of Gordon Street that is also kind of great for housing. And I'm curious if we've already passed 1 and 2, and so now we're gonna start exploring new sites. I have a curiosity about whether that is not a best practice.
I'll explain why this is a unique situation and
Okay.
worth exploring.
Okay.
One, it's literally across the street. So all of the things in terms of the impacts on the neighborhood are not only the same, but in fact they're better because the neighborhood has actually asked for this consideration. So check 1, why this is better and different and unique. Number 2 is that even in terms of like our infrastructure, they're both in the endowment lands, they're effectively the same, just literally across the street. They're the same, more or less the same dimension. They're both flat, like it's, I don't know why we wouldn't consider it that way, as opposed to the Kiwanis where you're talking about a different party and all the other stuff. Furthermore, when I explored
clarify
it with the climbing gym, I'll just say this last bit. When I asked them, I'm like, hey, what do you guys think of that? And they're like, we don't care. Like, it's literally across the street. If it's here or if it's there, makes no difference to us. So you've got a other party that has, informally at least, said, yeah, why not? Like, what's the big deal?
So just to clarify.
Again, different than Kiwanis.
Clarification
Just
and then
clarifying
Councillor
the
Page.
Kiwanis lands, they're not available we explored that. They're not available.
Councillor Page.
Great answer, but I just,
On-
in principle,
These were the only 2 sites that were
Right.
available because council had tied up a lot across the street with the climbing gym, so.
Okay,
The only
thank
2 lots available were these 2.
okay. Helps me understand.
I oppose this particular referral, because I'm a terrible person. Because I believe the mission here is to develop the best building on the lot that we're looking at. I think bringing the other relationships, the other parties, I think if that naturally was gonna happen, it might have already shaken out at an earlier proposal stage. I think the consideration of what a good building looks like on this lot is to me very much one question. And then what is a good building on the other lot is very much another question. And I think we're struggling in terms of impact in the conversation as it's been proposed, which is mostly to me where I'm coming from. Expectations when people bought their properties, expectations in terms of OCP and zoning alignments and how those are changing and how we're kind of doing that in scope of something to be expected, right? Like I'm not so bothered that's a big building, I'm more concerned that over time it's one of the first big buildings or it's something that hasn't been up there for a long time after the health campus, and so I wanna be accommodating within the R4 containment of what a box looks like at that lot and kind of pushing comfort, knowing there's always a discomfort when something changes in your neighborhood, but where do we find that balance? And so when I then say, oh, well, what if we bring this other thing in and this other thing in, it feels like too many externalities to be involving, even if we have a different conversation about the location where the climbing gym is later on. So for me, I think we need to figure out if we're comfortable keeping within the R4 box or not. Whether impacts right beside single family dwellings is something that we really need to be very, very careful of for height differentials or not. But it does bring in the other conversations. I think we need to still keep working on putting other projects in the pipeline and learning from this process around our land disposal process, around how we consult earlier in these stages to find those community organizations, because we see it, you know, where's the community organization, where's the housing operator organization, which nonprofit's doing what. I feel we're gonna build that sophistication. So for here right now, it does feel like a too much to muddy the two together, but sorry, that's where I'm at.
What is the motion?
Through the chair.
What, do we have a motion?
Yeah,
we have a
What's the
motion.
motion?
Just,
We've got a motion, a second, you can ask that if you like.
Can I hear it?
Yeah, we like the,
that staff explore the possibility to move the development to the lot across the street.
So as I acknowledged by the chair in response.
Did we get a second to that?
Yeah, Councillor Tate.
Okay, good, thank you.
And now we're in debate. This could go on all night.
Only if you say something new.
Okay, I'll try to say something new. Number one, if we were starting today, if we were looking at, oh, we have 2 lots here, which lot would we have chosen? We would have chosen the lot where the climbing gym is, if we were starting the process over. It's the better lot. And the question is, since no building has been built, no ground has been broken, no approvals have been given, we are effectively still at the beginning. So why not, since we are effectively at a beginning, do we not consider it? It doesn't make sense. Now, secondly, this isn't just about, you know, broader process about 4 stories and what the standard might set for other buildings. This is neighbors who live in these homes, who have built lives, and this is their home. That neighborhood is their home, and I've talked to not just the people who live in those houses, but people across the street and others. They feel passionately about that, and so if we're not gonna consider their home in our decision making here to make this small effort on their behalf, then like I don't understand why we wouldn't do that. It doesn't make a lot of sense to me. So what I would say is, let's just do this a little bit of extra effort. At the very least, we can learn something from it. And if it turns out that, you know what, it isn't that difficult to do, we get to a win-win where everybody benefits. We are more likely to have a better building that has more affordable units because we can build higher. And we have a happy neighborhood who's gonna embrace these new residents when they move in, as opposed to being resentful of the imposition that these neighbors and the process that led them to move in. So.
I would just say that I hear what Councillor Page is saying and I hear what you're saying, and I don't really see why one cancels out the other. I think we could very well be talking about a 4-story building on the other lot across the street as well. Like whatever makes sense for one side of the street is gonna make sense relatively for the other side of the street as well. It just might be a slightly better fit. So I personally feel like exploring that option and just seeing what it looks like doesn't necessarily prejudice us either way. And I am sensitive to sort of the creep of, it's been verbalized before, the creep of these variances being the norm. And if a variance is the norm, then it's not really a variance anymore. And so if every development is a variance, then what's the point really? So yeah. So I think I'm amenable to both of those points of view, and I think that this motion doesn't impact my views. It doesn't impact Keith's perspective. Can we We have a motion and a second, can we go on?
Could I just have a quick historical perspective? When that lot was designated for the cube, was there a reason for that instead of the one across the street?
No reason.
Because it's connected to the college.
Thank you, got it. But the cube, is it the cube? I'm sorry.
The cube, yeah.
The cube isn't associated with the college.
No.
But
They
It's
don't-
just a piece of
It's an
property.
amenity that would be used by
was
college
there.
students. I
Okay.
think that was the,
To them, to the
Rationale.
college, it makes no difference.
It's also across
I
the
think that-
street.
They can cross the street.
Okay,
I'm not saying
I'm
they
just
can't,
trying to
I'm just saying
understand
that's-
if there was a particular reason why that property was chosen,
no.
but
Makes
the
sense.
other property could have been
Totally.
chosen just as easily.
Well, I think,
Yeah.
again, at the time, having that building, that very tall building next to residential was a consideration.
The cube is gonna be how tall?
15 meters.
Pardon me?
I think they proposed a 15-meter wall in the cube.
Mhm.
So exceeding height.
And it could go down, it does and it's, could be
I'm just
tiny
saying that-
thing.
Footprint is smaller.
You could dig a
Footprint
hole.
is much smaller, you can dig a hole down, it's so much more flexible, it's basically a box.
Just trying to understand, thank you for.
I think that was the original, the
Wasn't
height of
here.
it, if
Wasn't
it
here
would
when
be
that happened.
connected to the college, you wouldn't have that.
So can we hear the motion, please?
That staff explore the possibility to move the development to the lot across the street,
Current development.
the current development.
I think we know what we're talking about, but is there an address that we could name on that
Yeah.
motion?
I don't think so.
Well,
It needs to be subdivided as well, I think, still.
It does, the
Yeah.
foot,
It could just be, you could use the
Cube
PID,
2.0.
that would make it clear.
sorry,
I don't
what did
think
you
we-
say?
I'll pull that up and get it on here,
Okay,
Yes.
I would think that would be neater.
Okay, so we have a motion, we have a second, we've had a discussion, we have a vote. All those in favor of the motion? Okay, and all those opposed? Okay, motion passes. Okay. So where are we? Are we?
This number 3 never got moved, so we just move on.
Yeah.
Okay.
Move on. So we don't have to defeat it.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.
That was so much. That was so much reading. Holy smokes.
That was a lot of reading.
That was a lot of reading.
I enjoyed it.
So
I learned so much.
I have a question for you after. I can't find a thing. You can show me.
Okay, moving on, shall we? We have one more bylaw. We have a 5-year financial plan bylaw, number 3637, 2025. Read the summary. The 5-year financial plan bylaw for the period 2025 to 2029 is being presented for council's consideration. The plan includes the revenues and expenditures planned for 2025 to 2029 that have been presented to both council and the public. All proposed expenditures, funding sources, and transfers to or between funds must be included in the plan. Both the operating budget and the capital budget information are attached in Schedule A of the bylaw. The 5-year financial plan, 2025 to 2029, bylaw number 3637, 2025, is presented for first 3 readings.
Sorry, can I just, excuse me, sorry, it's very difficult to.
Oh, I'm very sorry.
Okay, do we have somebody who's
Sorry.
presenting?
yeah, we have to, no, we're.
So,
I'm here if anybody has any
Yes,
questions.
okay.
well, I'll get it on the floor,
CFO
so,
Drury who will answer questions.
so I'll get it on the floor, number 1.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any questions? Or can you, sorry, can you
I'll read it.
the motion, please?
This is this is number 1, that the 5-year financial plan, 2025-2029, bylaw number 3637, 2025 be introduced and read for a first and second time by title only.
Okay, we have a seconder?
Yep, Councilor Locke.
Okay, alright, and any discussions, questions? Councilor Payne?
I think I have 2 quick questions. I just couldn't get this through my mind. How do you get proceeds from borrowing? Normally you get proceeds from lending or debt from borrowing. Help me, what am I missing there?
Yeah, so you go out and borrow and then that's the funding you receive.
Oh,
Is it because
thank
it's
you.
a negative number? And again, sorry, that's accountants with
It
their.
isn't a revenue source.
Yeah,
Okay,
it's
thank
sort-
you.
it is money coming
I knew
in
there
there.
was an easy I thought you earn interest, okay. And then my other question is, I didn't see it reflected in here, so I may just have missed it, but there was a discussion around shifting the homeowner business.
Yeah,
That's the tax rate.
yeah, this is the
Ratio?
5-year financial plan, so,
Okay,
yeah, prior to
head of it then.
May
It's okay.
15th, you need to do this, and then prior to a tax rate bylaw, you need to do this. So this is sort of the beginning. We know what sort of taxation revenue now we need to collect. How that shifts between different classes is a different bylaw, but you know, we can bring
Thanks.
that back.
I'll wait for that.
Yep.
I just wanted to make sure I understood that part of it because I don't really know how the businesses, they just provide feedback on the same form that everybody else does.
Correct.
And they don't know that that shift may happen, so it's sort of hard for them to
Yeah.
give feedback on that.
Well, the package that we put out for public comment did state that there would be a different increase for
Okay.
residential and for business in that plan. But again, that is a different bylaw, but that was sort of the conversation we had when we talked about the budget, is that kind of how we would shape that. So that information was out there. It was also in the Nelson Star article, I believe, that they had the two rates there, so.
Okay. So got it, next.
Anybody else? No? Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Can we have all in favor? And opposed? That passes. Sorry, what?
There's number 2. Second.
Yes, please. Can you read that first and second? Or
Yeah, that the
You're
5-year
moving-
financial plan, 2025-2029, bylaw number 3637, 2025, be read a third time by title only.
Do we have a second?
do we have a seconder?
Second.
Okay, Counselor Tate. Any discussion at all? We're good? All those in favor? And opposed? And it passes. Okay.
I'll move the minutes.
Sure, thank you.
So that was 14A, I'll move the minutes.
Council Lochtenberg is seconding.
Yeah, it's just for,
It's just
this
for-
council receives, yeah, you still have to call it.
Okay, now all those in favor of receiving the minutes? All those opposed? Passes. Okay, and reports are this.
So
we have
moved.
a mover and a seconder? So moved by Page and seconded by Woodward. Discussion at all? All those in favor? Opposed? And that passes also.
Before we go further,
Sorry.
correspondence always gets, it's listed there, but we don't really do anything with it. So we did have a significant amount of correspondence. How do we get follow-up on that? What would be the normal procedure? Would I ask at a
Just
meeting? Do I need to? Okay,
So it's
so,
there, that's why it's on the agenda. If
perfect.
council wants to pull anything out of the correspondence, that's what you do.
Okay, I saw responses to a couple of the pieces of correspondence, but the one about the Trevor Street extension, was that, was there a response sent out to that?
Is that the one from Brent Merton?
Yes.
Staff is working on a response to that,
So
so
it's
we will,
currently in the
we will
works?
be
Okay, so we will
responding
see
and we'll
that.
put that in the next
Thank
correspondence.
you. And the 25,000, out of number 4, the letter from Minister Farnsworth, the $25,000 to conduct the transit study from the RDCK. When, do we know where that process is and when we can anticipate seeing that? Is that early days or? Don't know, so I'll just go with that one. And then the BC Farmers Market is asking us to send a letter, so is that in process as well? To the Ministry of Health to say how valuable that program is to the citizens of Nelson. And I know people who utilize the BC Farmers Market coupons and it's extremely valuable, so do we need a resolution to support that and send a letter, or how does that work?
I think that letter's been sent, has it not? I'm sorry, I'm just butting in here. I think that letter's been sent.
That's what I'm asking, so if there's information, great.
I don't, not as far as I know. Not
Oh, okay, okay.
So we don't,
Maybe because Maddie's away, I thought that letter had been sent.
Yeah, I
We don't-
can follow up on that.
yeah, so we have a policy as long as it's not a cost to the city that, you know, the CAO or the
Great,
Americans
I
send
just
a
hadn't
letter.
seen it, I know it's timely, it's important, and I wanted to make sure that if
Yeah.
there was anything we needed to do, we did it now. And that was it for me, thank you, thank you so much, I really appreciate getting the correspondence in a timely fashion, so I can feel sort of on top of these requests from residences and make sure that we're crossing the Ts and dotting the Is. So thanks.
So did we do the reports?
Yes.
That's been done, okay.
Just the last thing is, if there's any late items,
I don't think we passed
There
the,
wasn't.
didn't we?
so, sorry, what's going on?
We can't do late items if we didn't introduce late items
Yeah.
at the beginning.
I was gonna say there is no late items. Sorry. There is no late items, so the last thing is a resolution to adjourn. That's Councillor Woodward, or sorry, it's not, it's Councillor Lochtenberg, and it's seconded by Councillor Page. And all in favor? Opposed and done. Thanks, everybody.
Good job.
Jesse Pinheiro,
Thank you.
well done. All the animals, I found it after all that.
Okay.
You were just saying it out loud and then I found it.